Bueno, pues buenos días y muchas
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for being here at Fundación Telefónica, and all of you who are following us on streaming at the second meeting of data journalism and open data from Fundación Telefónica. We're going to launch the second edition of the national meeting of journalists, programmers, and other professionals who have the ambitious objective to generate contents from data. My name is Rosa Maria Sanz, and I'm manager of management of know-how within Fundación Telefónica in collaboration with the Open Knowledge Foundation and Mediadat Prado is organizing this session with the experience that we have and the support of the speakers here, who we particularly thank for their presence. We're going to study the importance of data journalism in the world of communication, and we're going to get to know the trends and most common practices, looking at practical experiences and cases. Today's program has two speeches on how to tell stories visually and on journalism code writing, which is going to be complemented by a round table on the different ways to generate contents on data. After each session there will be a question and answer session. We will continue in the afternoon in Mediadat Prado with news and activities which will be followed up over the coming days, and I hope this will allow us to get to know better the latest trends in data journalism. For the second speech by Nicola, there is translation, simultaneous translation and into Spanish, and we will also give you one of our publications with regards to journalism. Now I will give the floor to the representative of Mediadat Prado, Mr. Garcia. Well, thank you very much, Rosa. Good morning to everybody. Well, I just wanted to review briefly the culture, the interest of Mediadat Prado in data, and to mention particularly the beginning of the Visualizar platform in 2007. This is a platform which is directed by José Luis de Vicente, who is the organizer of the exhibition in Barcelona, and he will come to the Telefónica Foundation. I think this is a very interesting project, but since 2007, this platform, Visualizar, had the aim, firstly, to develop projects to visualize data, and particularly through production workshops, and very soon it became a platform of data culture. We organize some production workshops like public data, non-public data, infrastructures, databases, and soon this expanded the potential, and this was something in addition to the culture of data as a whole. And so in 2011 the group of data journalism was started, and that was an initiative apart from the Visualizar platform of access info of the CBO Foundation, or also Mar Cabra, who coordinated at the time the workshop and the working group for several years, and now and from the Open Knowledge Foundation in Spain, she is the one who was coordinating this group. Why were we interested in Media Lab in organizing a work group of these characteristics? First of all, it was considered as a stable work platform, and it wasn't so much a question of organizing international events with which for production, but also to generate a local community that meets every month. And apart from generating that area for space for learning, the data journalism group is a learning group. It's also a group for experimenting and innovation, and there have been data tones, and there's also been production workshop which was organized in autumn last year. And we are interested in data journalism for two main reasons. First of all, because it is interdisciplinary, apart from the fact that in the title the word journalism is included, because far beyond the professional practice of journalism in a traditional sense. There are various diverse meeting points. And secondly, we're interested in data for journalism because it proposes a new model for the media, for the communications media, because the media are seen as a platform where a community is built. That is how this idea of platforms that allow the users to get involved and to develop projects is precisely the one that we want to start up in Media Lab Prada. There was a cultural center which is not so very much based in the transmission of contents, but which works indeed as a meeting point, a platform where the users can develop projects in collaboration with others. And so therefore, well, the idea of collaboration with the foundation in this case was to combine, on the one hand, the production in Media Lab and the conferences here in the foundation. I think that this is a very fruitful collaboration. I've got to thank Rosa Sainz because I'm thankful to her because she's wanted to launch this, not just this project, but many others. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Mar. Thank you. It's a very tall podium, but thank you very much to you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming, because I'm really very happy to see you all here. We've almost filled the auditorium, and I'm sure that in the 4 days that we're going to be organizing things, 3 days, sorry. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're going to have 4 days. We're going to do data journalism in these meetings. I'm sure that we're going to be gathering many more people. And we began this working group of data journalism several years ago in October 2011, and there were just a few in Media Lab Prado. It was in a kind of a basement. And when we began to talk about how to work with data and why PDF is the enemy of why the spreadsheets have to be our pets, which we most appreciate as journalists, it seemed then to be very odd at that time. And the truth is that it is a great honor to be able to organize these meetings with such a great support from the public and from the institutions. These are the second meetings on data journalism and open data. Basically, they were created one day over a pint of beer, and we were saying we have to do something nationally, and in Barcelona we have to boost what is being done in Madrid, and Carlo Pedro, who organized the meetings, and myself, we said, go on, let's do it. And this is a demonstration that something can be done that is really strong, something that changes, and it helps us to improve the journalism that we're doing in Spain in a very easy way, with a few more beers to accompany us. And the second meetings of data journalism, open data, we have a lot of support. I would like to remind you of all the support that we've had, because each one and everyone is so important. This event is organized by the Spanish Open Knowledge Foundation Group, and essentially it is an international organization that encourages open know-how and the construction of knowledge by sharing it freely so that it can be reused. And what we've done is to create a group here in Spain, and one of the things that we do that is of most importance is these meetings. We're an association, so if you want to become partners or members, it's only 25 euros. So if you want to become a member, come and see me, or you have a PayPal button on the website, and you have the support of Fundación Telefónica, Media Lab Pro Madrid, and also in Barcelona there's the support of the Contemporary Culture Center with the university supporting us, Ramon Yul, the Faculty of Communication with the support of Google, which has also supported this edition of the meetings, Night Mozilla Open News, which is international, and it has programmers within the newsrooms, and it is an example of how various disciplines work together. The City Council Barcelona also is helping us. I would like to stress also this year that we have a third satellite HQ in Almeria, and it really is fantastic that they are there in the Press Association in Almeria helping us to do these meetings. And I was saying all of the support from is of tremendous use, and thank you very much also to many small organizations, many individuals. Thanks to them all, we've been able to do this. There's Chicas Poderosas, powerful girls, who's represented here by Mariana Santos, who will talk, the College of Journalists of Catalonia, the Foundation CBO for Citizens, Oxfam, Intermon. We will do a hackathon, a practical workshop, and I encourage you. Infogram also is the visualization, data visualization tool, which is free and straightforward. With also Decide Datum del Confidencial, Datum Pres Moritz also is also helping us. All of these people, and the Archivists Association of Catalonia also helping us. All of them are all important, and I know that this seems like an institutional thing, but I think it is very important to remember each and every one of all the people who believed in this, because it might have begun in a bar with a couple of beers, but without them all, we wouldn't be having these meetings. These meetings want to go far beyond the typical journalist chats that we complain about, and what we want to do is we want to propose new ways of improving, and particularly to people to really get involved and to learn new tools in order to stop doing just journalism where you're making statements, but to do journalism based on facts, and that is a little bit more scientific. This is being done much more in press rooms, and it is a pity that in Spain we don't have a press room with a formal unit of data journalism, but I hope to come here next year once more and have a big round table with all the data units that I hope that will be created in the coming year. And without further ado, I would like to briefly review the technical matters of these meetings. We will begin now with the program that Rosa has already mentioned. Mariana Santos is Portuguese, but she's been working, traveling around Latin America all through last year, and she's going to explain Chicas Poderosas. She's been visiting all the editorial departments in Latin America, and this is how and to encourage women and to progress. And then we have Nicola Hughes from the UK, although she's Irish, and she's a journalist who years ago decided to start writing code, and she's going to try to get rid of our fear of doing that. And then we will have a discussion on how we can generate or stories from data, and we've got Noemi Ramirez also from El País, who will also be giving us a different view or vision of how we can work with data. And then afterwards, in the afternoon, do not leave, but go towards Media Lab Prado, which is near to Atocha Station, and we will be with Mariana Santos for 4.5 hours producing projects to visuals with data which have to do with cooperation. Then I encourage you to look at the Periodismo de Datos website in order to see the rest of the program that we have tomorrow afternoon. We have a very interesting workshop also on open source tools to extract, transform, and upload data.
Tenéis que venir mañana a aprender.
And if you don't know what that is, you have to come tomorrow to learn. And on Saturday, we will have workshops all day long with people from El Confidencial, from the International University of La Rioja, and other different places, in order to teach us with the computer there in front of us how to work with data. And then on Sunday, it is the day for production. We'll put our hat, today we will be bringing out a project. We'll try to do visual projects with Cooperation for Development data, and I will give you the idea that you must know that Spain is is the country in recession which has cut back the most in cooperation, and so we have there a big challenge to visualize that very significant problem. I didn't want to finish without thanking to somebody who's absolutely key, particularly for these meetings here in Madrid. That's Adolfo Alton, who's in the back room over there somewhere. Can you wave so that we can see you, Adolfo, so that we can thank Adolfo, really, because he's been helping us tremendously in these meetings. He's coordinated the entire program. He will be the contact point for these days, and you must know that this afternoon also, we will begin also in Barcelona, and some of the activities will also be carried out on streaming, so keep the links, and then next week you can do the Barcelona meetings offline. And I want to introduce to you Mariana Santos. She is a really powerful woman with a lot of energy, una mujer poderosa, a powerful woman in Spanish, and she worked in The Guardian in the UK in spite of the fact that she's Latin herself, and she revolutionized the visual department of The Guardian, and all her research and data projects and visuals that you've been seeing on working with data, and the speaker has lost her way of reading the riots, she's just recalled is the name of it, and she's worked on projects like that and over there, and she decided to do something which was very brave, which was to leave something like The Guardian. I think many of us would love to work there, but she was brave enough, and she went to revolutionize Latin America and get to do more work in Latin America, including technology and women, because here we have more or less parity. I'm very pleased to see a large number of women here, and it is true that clearly data is showing this, that there are many technological data, and we can do it also, and this is what I've tried to do, and that's what Mariana has tried to do in Latin America, and as in the Spanish-speaking world, we're now presenting powerful women in this location of Fundación Telefónica, and I'll give the floor to her now so that she can explain it.
Buenos días.
Hello, good morning. Well, thank you very much, Mar. You've been very kind in your presentation. I hope to be up to the expectations. First of all, forgive me for my Spanish, because it's a little bit of a mixture between Portuguese and Spanish, and a little bit difficult to understand, so I apologize for that. We have just arrived, because the last 4 days, from Thursday, Friday, up until Sunday, we were in Miami organizing this event, which is called Fail Fast, Succeed Soon, which was the 10th meeting of Chicas Poderosas, and we've done this, and we're thinking of Chile, Miguel Paz, and they are all very heavily involved in order to change the social context. And Costa Rica, and then Colombia, in Bogota, we involved the Ministry of Technology, who supported us in order to do an event with 500 people, and then afterwards Mexico, and perhaps you know Segnini, who's my boss and colleague in Costa Rica, and has always been my colleague in Chicas Poderosas, always working very hard in order to try not just to involve and to inspire more women, but also to train them, because to show them that it's not as difficult as it looks to use the data, and you just have to get down to it and experiment. Mar has asked me to talk about some projects. Okay, yesterday I gave a class, and my students are here today, so I changed my presentation so as not to repeat what I did. As you've heard already, I began at The Guardian. I worked in advertising. I did. And I didn't like very much the fact that I was selling a product which I didn't even like, but trying to sell it to somebody because I was in advertising. But what I like to do is to tell a story about that product, and that was the part of my job that really I liked. And when I had the opportunity of being interviewed with a technology boss, and I clearly knew I wanted to talk in that kind of development, but I didn't know how difficult it would be. And so when I had an interview, I interviewed the technological manager of The Guardian, and I said to him, I love The Guardian, but never in my life have I had the opportunity, or never had the option of perhaps working in The Guardian. I'm Portuguese, and we feel a little bit like the bottom of the pile in Europe, and many people view Europe starting from Spain, and many people haven't even heard of Portugal, unfortunately. And so we don't believe enough in ourselves sometimes. And I was really very excited, and he was so generous with me, and he spoke to me for 3 hours, this manager, and if you're so excited with kind of, why don't you come and work over here? And I didn't believe that. I couldn't believe that he was suggesting that to me. Well, obviously I want to do that. When can I start? And the following month I began. I was very excited, and so I began, and I got my first project. It was WikiLeaks. I just sold shampoos and spheres, and then I was dealing with the WikiLeaks data, and I didn't really know what it was because my boss said to me, well, and he's a visionary, I think, and his name is Alistair Dant, and we're working here, and we needed working in Flash to do the designs because he always had to go to the design department, and this was very laborious, and I thought that we were going to talk about a process of about how to work with data, and this was a process that didn't work yet, and so I went to sit there for a month trying to tell the story of WikiLeaks, and he was telling me, you can't talk to anyone about this. It's all top secret, and there were rooms that were closed, and I thought he was being a little bit hysterical. I didn't fully understand, but in the end I understood the importance of that database and the work that we were doing. And after that work, and thank goodness, I had the good fortune of remaining because they were happy with my work. And can you imagine a Portuguese person who was given that opportunity, and I didn't sleep for day and night, and I wanted to do it as best as I could. I really wanted to show off all the things that I was doing, and in the day I did WikiLeaks with my boss, and in the evening I did animations of an event for 2 years later, which was the Olympic Games. And this is the team that I worked with. As you can see at The Guardian, I invested an awful lot in development. This was our team. It was a team that Nicolas also worked with us. It was essentially myself, Alistair, and all the rest doing data, and the journalism got data, and then they asked us to do a visual explanation or narrative, and then these projects began to become like public relations. Whenever there was a project, and people would say, look at what the Guardian has done, there was a competition with the New York Times, and that was a selling proposition it became, and it was something that we saw in public relations, and we gained an awful lot. And then the people asked, well, did they have a lot of visits? And I don't know if you can measure that by clicks, because there's still a very specific audience that is interested in this. It's not like selling a popular newspaper that sells millions. It's not the same. We don't have the same audience. So that's how we worked, and then the journalists looked at it and signed at the end. Now we have to get the support and contributions of our colleagues, the journalists. Well, here I have to know about design, development, and they're good journalists. So normally they're specialized in a particular area, and they have the support of other people who are specialized in their own areas. And so we have developers who are specifically developing in back-end and front-end and data management, and so it is very specific. So if you can be a premium contributor when there are many premium contributors, then the final effect is very good. And last year, after 3 years working in The Guardian, as you can imagine, that was my dream job, which I hadn't dared to dream about before. And I thought, well, I'll stay here all my life, whilst I wasn't too happy about the rain in London, but nevertheless, I was delighted with the team, with my work, and I was learning every day. And Alistair Dant was really a life changer for me, because really he invested his time, and he helped me and supported me, trained me, and I am trained in communication design, not as a journalist really. So he taught me the practice, the philosophy, with a very paternal attitude really, because he really invested half of his time to teach me, and that is why I owe a lot to him. And when they invited me to do Night Fellow, and my boss had gone to the New York Times, when the team, he had always been my mentor, not just mine. He was the mentor really for the entire team, because he was a visionary, and he wanted to go forward, and he wasn't afraid of risk. And so for us, it was really exciting to work like that, and we didn't know and we always tried to be as far ahead as possible, because that was the challenge. We wanted to use the technology to be one step ahead, and he allowed us to make our mistakes, and that was very important too. And when he left, we lost our leader, and then afterwards, and here I'll tell you a little bit, confidentially of course, that I, as a Portuguese woman, I'm 28 years old, and as a woman, these three factors, I felt, well, naturally, I managed all the subjects, and I could have been the next team boss, and I multitasking, and the guys like one task at a time, and to be fully involved. And naturally, I talked with all the different teams, and I felt that the top boss, that woman, didn't allow me to take the reins of the group. And I thought, well, what's going to happen? We need a leader. We need to know at least who is the head, who is in charge and responsible for the group. And they were a bit vague about this. And in the end, they got a person who came from the printing department, and there was a team that didn't really know each other very well. And they weren't that interested. And so my motivation fell, and after 3 years, when I had a learning curve like going up and up and up, and then suddenly it slowed down, and I had been used to a very fast rhythm, and I missed that, and I needed a new challenge. Just at that point, in the International Center for Journalism, they invited me, and they said, we need ladies who do what you do, which is visualization and to manage teams. Can you give us your dream? And of course I had thousands of dreams, and I wasn't fearful of talking about my dreams. I wrote on a big piece of paper. I was the only woman on my team, and I felt that we should be more, that we women, we have some qualities that we don't necessarily have to design code intensely like that, but we have the characteristics in order to head teams and to do many projects at the same time, in order to bear in mind the emotions of each person. This may be something subtle, but when you work with deadlines and with a lot of pressure from the publishers, it is very important to keep calm, and in situations of major stress to calm down the others. And so we're very good at that, and so I was a month thinking about it. I didn't accept it just like that. Am I going to leave my dream job and what I do? But the challenge to go to Latin America, which furthermore, in my opinion, a year ago, I know what the feeling was, that it was a very dangerous place, because I could be murdered in the street, but never, because it was much more peaceful in London. But I still decided to go because I wanted to do something with my life, and I started this program, which is called Chicas Poderosas, powerful girls or powerful women, and so something like Hexen Hackers. I don't know if you know about that. Hexen Hackers is a group, which is a world group, which works in the main cities of London, New York, Santiago, Buenos Aires. And what they do, they meet like this, but it is more informal in a bar or cafe, and people get, and designers and journalists meet to present projects like this for 10-minute presentations, see who wants to work in a community. And so it's incredible. But what happens? Well, I'm involved in London, in Chile, in Buenos Aires, and now in San Jose. We began Hexen Hackers in Costa Rica, which is where I live right now. And 95% are men. These boys, guys who like technology, perhaps they want to develop other fields with the girls. They can be involved, but there can be so many good people. They don't want to show that. Well, we didn't want to show our fragility, and so we had to create a Hexen Hackers dedicated to women. And this is not a feminist movement which is just dedicated to women. It's called Girls, because in this way the girls are thinking, well, it's an invention for me. I'm going to join, and without being fearful of presenting myself, and the boys say, well, girls are going to go, and so I also want to do that. And then in the end we have 50-50 instead of 95% to 5%. And so the challenge is to increase work in the editorial departments in Latin America, to improve the narration, and to involve women in technology. This to be project managers, or it could be to understand what projects can be done with these technologies. Doesn't mean that we have to develop from the beginning to the end, but and so these are some figures that show that less than a quarter of technological jobs involve women, and the tendency will be for more women to become more and more involved, and this is going to be developed at many levels, not just in companies, but also it has been shown that the GDP of a country could improve if there were more women involved in high positions, high management positions. And so in Miami we have Chris Wu, who was the girl who began Hacks and Hackers movement, and she is now recently she's become the director of all the programmers of the New York Times, and she's an incredible person. She has a lot of know-how of technology and to develop with developers, and she's a great inspiration. There's Roberto Rodriguez, who's a developer from Costa Rica, who's come with us with Chicas Poderosas, and he tells us step by step the methodology. And Giannina Segnini, who's my boss, she's my diva, and I want to be like her one day. And she works with data, very often life, because of the subjects that she works with in Costa Rica, through crossing databases. She's discovered a lot of corruption among politicians who've been subsequently taken to jail, and if you do that you can get into trouble in Latin America. And she's still doing that, and now she doesn't have a bodyguard anymore, but she has me.
Well, Martin Caparrós, that you maybe know him, he wrote to me to tell me, well, I will be in Miami. I would like to go to Chicas. Can I? Yeah, it could seem a little bit crazy, but he has nothing to do with technology, but he has a philosophy of life, a way of thinking, and he has talked to us, and it was very interesting. And I thought, well, I write a book from the beginning to the end, and the reader will read everything. But now I'm writing a book that's talking about about the hunger, and there are hunger problems that are linked to some companies, to some countries that have a high degree of hunger. Where should I begin? I was thinking about how to do a non-linear narrative. How can a reader to skip some parts of the information and to read the information that is interesting? And that is where we had the idea to make an interactive version of his book, not an interactive version, but something interactive that has to do with the book. Michael Bauer, that comes from Austria, was very involved in Latin American. He has representative persons in every Latin American country. Robert Hernandez, who is a journalist who is involved in technology, and he's even thinking in much more futuristic things like, for example, journalism with Google glasses, and he has a very interesting perspective. Alberto Caro, he's my idol since I started to do data visualization. He lives in Miami. Maybe you know him because he started here, and he has been with us to explain the theories of visualization, to try to help groups to look forward and to see where they want to reach with their project. This is my boss, Alistair, and Mark Abra, that was with us in the marathon, showing very interesting things about how to do a data bullfighter. Chris Cross, that is a Guardian developer. He does everything he's asked to. He reinvents himself, and everything is possible. Everything that we want to do is possible. Sisan Shamsi, he's a recruiter senior of development for the BBC. He works with the England government, and he investigates about how to ask for data and to receive these data from the governments or the companies, and he provides many information, for example, how the open data Mexican government can be improved. And in this event there were 4 of chicas. In the mornings we have discussions, and these people meet to discuss all these issues. We'll try that the chica, the girl that was representing that group, can move to England to work there for a month to see the best practices that are implemented there to take them to Mexico. We would like to have some insights from the developed world to help to improve the social and economic environment. Miguel Paz is the father of Chicas Poderosas. We started with him in Chile when we were looking for a man. He was the one that had the idea of Chicas Poderosas. We took the super away because Chicas Poderosas was very efficient, and the process for this year was to teach the process, because as far as we know the process, it can be reinvented, remade, it can be reformulated again, and this is the motto for this year. I believe a lot in mentorship, and if my boss was a mentor for me, he has opened my mind, things that I never thought that I could think. I want to reply that with other people, specifically with women, but not only with them. And in Latin, that is where I think that they need it the most. Well, I haven't been to Asia, but I'm very linked to Latin, and I know that they need these kind of things. There are things that I didn't know, and I feel so ignorant for not having known them, because I didn't receive the Latin reality. For example, in Mexico, there are buses that are only for women. And I asked, but why? Because if women go on the same bus of men, they are abused, and everything that you can think about. As well as in the subway, there are rails for men and rails for women. This doesn't happen here, but it exists. We make hackathons in Venezuela. We established a team of 100 researchers and developers. We implement implement researches, and sometimes the women say, well, if I do this, someone can shoot me. So it's a very complicated situation, and we want to try to help as far as we are protected by big companies, like for example the International Center for Journalists. We are protected, but there are important cases that are not so good. Well, you can say, well, you can kill one, but we are a lot more. For me, life is much more than being protected in London. Well, maybe it's a crisis of identity, but well, you can visit the website on the internet. Another person created this project that is called Hackdash. Is a way of having a blank screen where everyone can add his or her project and work, and we can work together in the project. We have citizens. We have 101 day. We see here Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who passed away some days ago. This is the story of the characters. For example, we want to establish a center for gender violence that can show to the world how's the situation, and to show which are the countries that have a highest rate of this kind of violence. They were working on this, who is who spends money in which kind of things, and trying to establish a visualization that could show the open course of every candidate. This project was about the bad quality of water in Guanabara in Brazil, because there are many environmental issues. This has fosas clandestinas in Mexico, about organized crime. People lose relatives, and they don't know where they are. They are trying to map where they are. The Panama procurement data, because there was there was a place with many data, but they threatened to take that place away, and they tried to have all those informations with a copy, the information about Miami, etc. These are animals that are in risk of extinction, and well, these are very interesting data. And that's the way Chicas Poderosas works. Everyone that wants to take part, chicaspoderosas.org. We are a non-profit organization, and it's a fight to obtain sponsorship for events that are important for us. It's very difficult, but we never give up. So, well, Chicas started as a familiar project with some partners, and it's expanding now. I don't know if we're running out of time, but we'll have some projects here in Bogota. I went there for a week. I not only work with a real... I try to make the convergence of print to digital that many times, principally in LATAM, is far away. There are people that make print because they think it's much stronger because it's still sold, and I want to move to digital. That's not journalism. There are people that want to do it, and when the directors of the management teams want to, they invite people to do it. And when I had a scholarship there, I could try to work with the team, and in this case I moved to work to Bogota with the team of the University of Los Andes. There were around 12 or 14 people between teachers of gastronomy, literature, music, etc. They met together to establish a project to make data visualization. We searched for inspiration. We deconstructed some for example, snowfalls. And our conclusion was not to work on the paramilitaries, neither paramilitary nor parapoliticals, because every time that we move to this kind of issues, well, I shot a short film about the people working, and the Colombian music that I had on my phone was Shakira, and when I showed them the video, they told me, "Whoa, Shakira, no, but that's not representative of Bogota, neither from Bogota nor from Colombia." So we want to develop a project to show how the Colombian music is, that is much richer than Shakira, and that was the issue that we chose. And after a long brainstorm, we divided it in 4 parts: the main characters, who are all the musicians, all the creators of musical instruments, all the people that dance, all the people involved with music. We wanted to map all the events, starting with Bogota because we had little time. And in Bogota, which is a very big city, this not only could be a project of mapping the musical culture, but also a service for visitors and for music lovers, involving many people that not only has to do with music as clubs, as events, etc. Then the influences, and here we will watch just a short video.
Bueno, este proyecto dicen que va a estar...
Well, this project will be concluded in 3 months, and basically we not only have to talk about deaths, but we have to talk about other things in Latin. The fact of being involved in this, well, Colombia has funds for heritage of journalists that were murdered for writing articles that were discussing for someone, and they have money for many heritage issues. It's something that is lived, and we have to celebrate it, and not only developing data about negative things. There are many data about positive things, so it's some kind of celebration. I can put this presentation afterwards if you want to see more. Another thing that was very interesting was the instruments. Where does the inspiration come from for instruments? There is a curiosity that many people that are born with an attitude or a talent for music go to study to Denmark and move and come back, and the music from Denmark has a strong influence in Colombia for that reason. And we try to make the website using frames, so all the creation process of digital content from A to C to A to Z, learning about skills, web designs, all in a week. And then data visualization that can be filtered by gender, style of music, etc., to making a visualization experiment. And here we have the playlist that's an application for iPhone, iPad, etc. And it's not only a report of musical culture, but also a service for people. And we shot this short film about what we learned. A group of journalists met with Mariana Santos, which was the leader of the methodology. Has to do with design thinking, with many people from many fields contributing for the development of the idea. And this is what we learned. We learned that the interdisciplinary teams are very important for these projects, because from the tools and from the background that everyone has, they are very important for the creative process and for the production process, when some skills are fundamental to build the project. Well, I learned that technology has always to be in the service of story. Some things can be very fashion, of web design or web development or data visualization, like, for example, I don't know, parallels and that kind of things. But if we don't enable it, it has no sense to fight against a technology that won't help us to tell a story. Well, I learned that the most important thing in this journalist development is how to, in the project, all the things that can happen in the execution and when the project is online. I learned that the digital is not to get involved with the computers and things like that, but we have to make some handwork. We have to paint, to design, to develop processes. The most important thing are the ideas, and it's a handwork issue, and that's what I learned here. Well, I learned that databases and numbers can tell stories. Well, I learned that journalists have to stop thinking that we are the only ones that make this kind of work, and we have to work hand in hand with designers and programmers. Well, I learned that communication goes further beyond of the word, and we have to provide a visual architecture so that people can tell everything they don't want to tell. I learned that we have to work in a team. We can organize our ideas, and the information visualization is the best way to get art close to journalism. I learned about the importance of having a team, of the entrepreneurship, and many times the designer is in the end the one that makes other kind of tasks. So we have to understand how a team works. I learned about different methodologies that are very important, and we have many important reference of projects that tell stories through data. Well, in the workshop I learned that we don't have to how to do everything. We don't have to know how to do everything. There are many things in a project. There are some specialties in different people that will strengthen the team. In the course of Mariana, I learned that as we are interdisciplinary team, the work is better when the designer gives feedback of the work of the journalist, when the journalist gives a feedback about the work of the programmer, and things like this. I learned that journalists don't have to work alone, that we have to work on a team, and that everyone has to develop their own work to tell a story the best way as possible.
Entonces, es esto que hace.
Well, this is what Chicas tries to do, is to try to connect people that makes good things with people that wants to make good things. In Miami there are 100 people, 22 speakers from all over the world, which are very involved during 4 days that are quite intense. But the knowledge injection is very big, and when they go back to their universities, their positions, they can share what Chicas propose. So thank you very much. So we can't hear the speaker because there's no microphone.
Gracias.
Thank you. The question that I would like to pose, well, initially I think that we all know that the opportunities that must be generated as journalists are on the internet, but I think that the problem is that we haven't clarified how we have to do this, how to do this work to generate these opportunities on the internet. So I would like to know if you could explain to us how is the dynamics of work in that team between journalists, designers, and developers, because as journalists, we many times we make the mistake that we have to know how to do everything since the beginning of the story, how to tell the story, to make the design, and then we always find the obstacle of the development on the internet. So I would like you to clarify up to where does the role of everyone reaches, because we think that we know everything and in the end we don't know a lot. So I would like you to mark a little bit where are we reaching to in that interdisciplinary team to start to visualize data. Well, it's not only you that has this question. I also think that I have to know how to do everything, but now I'm learning that if we trust on our partners, and if we can have a team in which everyone gives its maximum, you can involve the designers and the developers on your team. So I had the big lack of working with people that was much better with me, so I always had to do my best, but I knew that I had their support. So in my case, I think that in the case of The Guardian, every journalist knew the story they wanted to tell. They didn't know how to tell it because they were open to people with other point of views. But well, for example, in Guardian we do something on Google style 2 days in a month. We don't work for The Guardian, but we do some kind of rockathon all the developers, for example, there's an issue. We want more clicks on the sites. How can we accomplish that? There are people that come with 1,000 of ideas that we hadn't thought about. How to involve the users, and it's some way of giving the developers what can they develop for us. For example, we can say, well, this can be very interactive. We can have a story that has to do with the technology. I mean, it's like having a database of ideas, both of development and journalistic. And I think that the best thing is to know and to have a notion of what you can accomplish with technology. We don't know, for example, a team that for the first time observes a snowfall. It's a technique that is called parallax, that when you make a scroll from up to the bottom, the images and videos goes to the screen when you're doing a scroll down. And as journalist doesn't have to know that. It's a little bit technical, but if you spend a couple of minutes with a developer and he explains how this is done, maybe next time you can involve not only the technique but also other techniques for other projects. We should know how to develop it, but we should know how things are done, or how it's possible to accomplish something, to tell your partner or the developer or programmer, well, I want to do something snowfall style with this work. Here I have the videos, the images, the text. Let's work together. Let's put it in common. I had a project with that issue when I moved to Chile. I asked them, what's your dream? Snowfall, for The Guardian, The New York Times, National Public Radio. Well, we will love it, but we don't know how to do it. We will never do it. They thought that they could never do it. The only thing that I did was, well, this is done like this way, as I've just explained, with pixels and to vertical scroll of the screen, and they understood that, and they on their own snowfall. I'm going to show it to you because it's spectacular. Let me show it to you. Let me show it to you. For example, here we have the application on the iPad. This was their own snowfall about the 40 years of they learned with Google how to make a snowfall for iPads, and it was spectacular. This project was spectacular. It was very humanistic. I love this visual part. They didn't have the money for having an helicopter to fly over the mountains to make a 3D representation. They made a map, but the story was commented, and well, they did it, knowing the process. Apart from knowing about technology, you must be interested about how things are done. If you have the luck to work with a team, because many times people don't have money, you can accomplish this. But if your communication media don't have money, there are many tools. For example, Google Fishing Tables, for example, it's a basic tool, but without knowing everything, with a couple of tutorials you can establish it on your own without depending on anyone. For example, you can do a visualization on your own. If you are more interested, you can develop more, but I think that knowing the process is the most important thing for me.
Aquí.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muchas gracias.
Hello, thank you for so inspiring inspiration. Let's see, for someone that has been in journalism for more than 20 years, I'm very surprised about the working environment that you were defining in The Guardian, that ecosystem of knowledge, of creation. I envy it a lot. You said something that I would like you to precise a little bit more. You've said they let us fail. Could you explain, with that capacity that you have to transmit, what what do you mean with that sentence in a historic organization? Because the Guardian is not the same as a startup. Yeah, for example, when Steve Jobs passed away, our editor-in-chief told us, well, we want to do something spectacular about Steve Jobs because he was, every day, for example, we didn't launch breaking news because the projects, we needed 3 weeks to develop a project. And when I say to fail, I mean exactly that. For example, no matter they are crazy, no matter they are risky with technology, we want them to experience things that they haven't still experienced. For example, with Steve Jobs, we made something, we wanted to be spectacular, Steve Jobs, a screen of 360 degrees with little squares with your first device of Apple that you bought, and a brief comment about Steve Jobs changed your life, but that would need years to charge. People got bored. That was a fail. For example, with the Twin Towers, the attack of the Twin Towers, we did something similar. That was we could see that the towers was the center of the visualization, and around it, in the north of New York, we saw the messages of where you were that day. For example, if you came from China, well, it was a fail. It was very complicated. No, it didn't work. It wasn't good. These are important issues. We should have launched something good, but we failed. But our editor-in-chief was annoyed. But they asked us to be risky, and if we do something that we don't know, the probability of failing is very high. If we do something that we have done many times, the failing rate is much smaller. 4 years ago, well, they asked us, well, let's do that balls project. We have done many projects about that issue, and we as creatives, and with the aim of defending our creative space, we wanted to do something different. They want with a different situation. It was like repeating projects, and we didn't like it a lot. But my boss was a little bit annoyed. But when they let us to be risky, our projects that maybe are not successful, but for example, reading the rights was an experiment, but it was very successful. We needed a month to develop it. In a month, for example, I moved to Chile, and these people make everything in a couple of weeks. So I think that LATAM is very powerful, and I love to work there. And they can't fail as we can, but when they bring something from outside, what they call gringo factor, they listen to them. Well, we'll do everything what you asking us for. I was never listened in The Guardian. I started experiencing, and well, we finally were successful. But well, I think that if we can fail, I think that fails the way to reaching innovation, because if we do everything the same things, we won't change nothing. We will change nothing. Okay?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Bueno.
Well, thank you very much, Mariana. We'll keep that idea now of experimenta. And this is the idea of fail fast, succeed soon. So if you can fail or make mistakes quickly. Now we'll have the speech by Nicola Hughes, who's going to speak in English. So if you need some headsets, we have headsets at the back, and this is the moment to go and get them if you need them. So you will have 2 minutes to get up if you want. And if you need the translation, and if you're all fantastic and you know English wonderfully, well, then you won't need them. But I want to introduce Nicola Hughes, because she's a person who you can follow on Twitter as Data Miner UK, and she is a journalist, but she decided to leave her comfortable job in places like CNN to go to a startup to write code, to scrape a wiki, which is an organization which facilitates various different codes in order to scratch or scrape websites. And so she has been writing code since then. Now she's come back to the editorial department. She's in the Times. She's going to tell us about how journalists can lose the fear of writing code, or to work with people writing code, because she's been doing it for years, and we can do magic together. Welcome, Nicola.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for my Spanish. I don't have any. So please take headphones, either that or I have to sit here pointing at slides going, sí, seeing as the only word I know. Or destroy your beautiful language with dreadful pronunciation, which is another option I do not want. So let me start my timer. Okay. And let me escape from this. To go. Here's the first one. That's okay. If I need help with this Mac, it would be very embarrassing. But there's always technical issues. I'll keep this here for questions that you can ask in Spanish, but please be patient. So I am a data journalist at the Times and Sunday Times of London. It is one of the oldest newspapers in Europe. Its first foreign story was on the Napoleonic Wars. It is entrenched in conservative Britain, and therefore the same is good, never changing is even better. But I actually work with editorial on data-driven investigations. I am a programmer. I'm a chicas poderosa. I'm not formally trained. I never did a university course. I never did a paid course. I taught myself with the help from a lot of friends and every free online resource you can get your hands on, which now, thankfully, is many. I would like to start this presentation with some interaction. Seeing as we are no longer analog, I've got my audience in front of me. Let's get interactive. Hands up those of you who mainly use news as your source. So press releases, other news sites, the wires. Hands up who uses them as that is their main source. Yes, in traditional journalism and in journalism schools, that's what you're taught to use. Hands up those of you who use a computer as part of your daily work. Computer? Yes, everywhere. Hands up those of you who feel in complete control of all the digital elements that you use. Complete control of your computer, your sources, yet mostly no one. For me, learning to code, and most importantly, getting over the fear of learning to code, is about control. Control not in the sense of rigidity, but in the sense of flexibility. Control not in the sense of regimentation, but in creation and imagination. If you think of journalism as a craft, just like any piece of work, any masterpiece, you start off learning the craft as an apprentice. You need to learn to use your tools in order to build something truly beautiful. And for me, I am a journalist not just on the web, but of the web. So my tool is what the web is made of. And that is ones and zeros that we use as coding language. So what is important is that you don't need to learn to code. I'm not here to tell you that. But I'm here to tell you just getting over the fear is a huge step to working in a multidisciplinary team and making something truly amazing that will last, that won't be thrown out or forgotten about. So control and having control is not being able to do everything and know everything. That is not what stops you being in control. It's fear that stops you being in control. So what do I mean? In terms of being able to understand what programming does, it allows you to imagine what is possible. So the first example I have is actually Hurricane Sandy, which was a massive news story. And what did we see? Picture after picture of destruction. On the news, you get the poor weather presenters or the young kid new on the block that they give a pair of wellies and send out to the middle of nowhere, screaming into a microphone as things fly at them. And that's their due, and that's what television makes them do for these sort of stories. It also is about looking for a sense of scale. Yes, we get a lot of satellite imagery, but that gives us cloud, that gives us what we can see. But something like weather affects things that are invisible. So this is wind map. This is a visualization of the wind. We collect weather data, we have this as data. Why don't we make it? So this is Hurricane Sandy. And this is a gallery, but if you go to wind gallery, search for it, it's live in America. You can see the wind anywhere in America, and they have certain galleries for certain days for major events. And so a traditional journalist seeing data would say, give me the top 10. Give me the top 10 windiest cities. Is it Chicago? Someone who programs will say, right, let's make something. And this, for me, tells the story of Hurricane Sandy a lot better than someone standing in the rain. What about things we can't even see? What about making something that is not actually part of our reality? So this is an amazing piece of work, and it wasn't difficult to do. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of code. It's actually done in Flash. It doesn't take a huge multidisciplinary team. It takes someone who knows what to do with what they are given. This has been created by Amanda Cox, a female statistician who works for the New York Times, who, in my mind, is a genius of creation. You think statisticians are boring? She can take stats and make things journalistically interesting, amazing, and beautiful. So she was given a story. When I say given a story, she wasn't even given a story. She was given this, which is, we want to do something about the Winter Olympics. Something that broad. If you can imagine your editor coming up to you saying, do something on the Winter Olympics. And that was her brief. What she did pick up on, which is the difference between the Summer Olympics and the Winter Olympics. Summer Olympics is dominated by track and field. It's dominated by the 100 meters, by the 200 meters. And why is that so exciting to watch? It's so exciting to watch because you have everyone lined up and you have a finish line. And you have a finish. And you see a gold medalist, you see a silver medalist, you see a bronze medalist, and everyone in between. You know how everyone did in an instant. The Winter Olympics is not like that. They have a lot of downhill skiing where you can't get everyone in a row crashing into each other and causing avalanches. They go one by one, and then they sit there at the bottom like a fish out of water, waiting for their time, biting their nails. And only after their time do you see if they've won anything, because they all have to go down individually. So she wanted to think about, well, what if you could line them all up and get them to go down at once? What would that finish line be like? We can't even physically be there, but I've got their times. I've got one piece of data, and why don't I do that? And she did. So I would like to get the sound up on here. She didn't do it visually. She did it through the medium of sound, which is the best way to incorporate time. So I would like everyone to close their eyes and think about downhill skiing. And what if you got everyone to go down at once and you were at the finishing line? How would they finish? Everyone close their eyes and listen to this. That is at the finishing line. Whenever you hear a sound, it is someone crossing the finishing line. And here's the men's slalom. And then you can hear how, for instance, the different gold, once you hit gold, how far away they were and how close they were together, that person won by quite a fair bit. How about this person? This person only just about got gold because someone came soon after them. And so to be able to create something, we can make a reality that was never even there. And that is something that's actually very, very simple to do. But it's because she wasn't regimented in churning out the same thing and doing the same thing all the time. She was given a wide scope, and she knew what was possible to do with one variable and one thing that is interesting about the Winter Olympics. Another thing that is very important about not being afraid and not necessarily coding is to realize that the medium is the message. So just as how you say something is just as important as what you say, how you build something is just as important as what you build. So, for instance, whenever I have an idea to create something out of code, using data, with a journalist, with a design team, and other far advanced developers, what I say to myself is, if someone can say it, if someone can write it, if someone can film it, I haven't done my job. It has to be something that I have to build. Just as to take something to an editor, I can't go with a headline. I have to go with a prototype. It has to be built because the medium is the message. And another example of this is again from the New York Times, done in Flash, very simple. And it's something that always hits the news, which is the unemployment rate, which is given a number, and maybe how it's changed over time. It's given two variables, and you're thinking, oh, it's going up, that's bad for the economy. But it is one number that represents an entire population. It is one number that says only comparative over time. It doesn't really tell that much of a story. So, for instance, the medium being the message is watch what happens. When I interact with something, it means something happens, and that something happening is what is telling the story. It's not the words, it's not what you see. So this involves movement. So I have all races. Watch what happens when I click black. What happens to the line? Watch what happens when I click men. What happens to the line? 15 to 24, that's completely gone off the scale. Not a high school graduate, that's their difference. Almost 50%, compared to a number that would have been reported that you would have wrote on, which is 8.6%. That movement, that tells the story. And how can you write that? How can you film that? That's just it. I can't even tell you, I have to show you it. That is the medium telling a story. So to be of the web and not just on the web, you have to come to terms with the fact that the medium is the message, and to think about doing something purely digital, ask yourself, can I say it? Can I write it? Can I film it? If you cannot, then you are truly of the web. And that's what you need a multidisciplinary team. And you don't need to code. You need to be able to know what it can do. And you need to not be frightened of tackling it and getting a group of people to tackle something. So it's a story that is told with more than words, but what's important is that it is a story. A lot of what's being done in terms of visualizations is just almost like throwing food onto a plate and seeing where it lands, rather than putting things in its place so that the meal looks delicious and you want to consume it. Now more so than anything else, there's bar charts and things that you can click on, but users tend to get lost in it. They want a story. They want the journalism in it. Don't think just because someone in your team can code and design and do great things that your role is secondary to it all. What's most important is the journalism. And a lot of organizations that are either not for journalistic purposes, for ad agencies or for civic uses, what they crave is the journalist that knows how to work with these things. Because to a certain extent, designers and developers, they can easily get their hands on. But it's very difficult for them, and they realize that that's when everything falls apart. Because if you have a great lovely piece of code, works fast in all browsers on the phone, great. And a design that's colorful and moving, but people have no idea what the hell it is, then you've wasted that time and that energy. So I'd like to show you a piece of film, because I think everyone thinks interaction is now for the web, and that it's taken from pie charts that used to be in print on newspapers and making it interactive. I think what's being let down and what's not being thought of a lot is film and the broadcast medium. I was trained as a broadcast journalist, and this is where people like Mariana really, really come in handy. So hopefully this can be translated as well. Let me put this on. Watch how this has visual elements, but a storytelling. And ask yourself, if there wasn't someone telling you this, and you had to go and fiddle around with yourself, would you have gotten as much out of it?
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health, life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400, $4,000, and $40,000. So, down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe. And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. The United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, Despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, would you...
So you can find all that graph in time. It's very simple, 2 axes. There's a color for the countries, the size of the bubble is the population, and there's a time scale. You can find all of that on Gapminder. But if you had come across the website and played around for a bit, would you have gleaned half of that? Would you have spent 5 minutes on it? I know that's Hans Rosling's gig. This is all he does. He's been on TED doing the same thing. But this would never have been put on the BBC if it wasn't for him. He is the champion of this information, rather than vice versa. And that goes to show that it's important to have a person there telling a story. So what about my story? So I am a traditionally trained journalist, and as most people who went into journalism and actually got out of journalism, I thought journalism would be like this. It would be exciting. I would go places, I would see things, I would uncover things and save the world. But it's not like that. It hasn't been for a long time. It's actually more like this. It's more like sitting in front of a computer. And rather than going, that's terrible, these Google people taking my money and not allowing me to travel on expensive airfare, if you're given lemons, make lemonade. So I graduated at the worst possible time in history. I don't know whether you saw it on that chart, but I'm pretty sure that my bubble would have been very, very low down at the height of the global recession looking for work. I'm pretty sure my lifespan and health decreased. So I came out with very little opportunity. The opportunity I could get was part-time at CNN International. Like I said, I trained as a broadcast journalist. I was turning the dial of the auto cue, part-time. That was my job, just turning it so the words went and the presenters could read. So mostly I was stuck at a computer in between jumping into the shows and turning the auto cue. So I used what I had in front of me and turned as much as possible to a journalistic endeavor. So what CNN International is known for is getting on the ground and getting the images fast. They are disaster, conflict, war is what they do best because they have an amazing logistics team, and they get the camera and they pop up there and there's things blowing, and that's what they do. When I was there as a broadcast assistant, Mount Merapi in Indonesia erupted, causing earthquakes and tsunamis. And this is the sort of disaster which CNN send a crew out and they go for. I was, instead of using wires, I was looking at Twitter. I was looking at live sources of news and bloggers. I was looking at what people were putting out on the internet rather than news organizations. And so within a matter of 3 hours, I think it was, things started coming out from the ground. But there was also the issue of Mount Merapi erupted before, and there's old photos of those. And so I was looking for someone to get on Skype and on the TV on the ground before our crew could get there. And so I looked on Twitter. I found old photos. I knew they were old because I used a search engine called Topsy. Put that link in there, and at the side it gives you a timeline of how often it's hit Twitter. And I know if it's more than a day old, it's the wrong photo. From that, I was managed to find one photo which I saw did not come out in the previous eruption. I found that person on Twitter. She had a weird Twitter handle, but I got her name from her blog. She was a science communication student at a university just at the base of that mountain. I got to the university. I phoned them. I asked for her. I got to her dorm. I got her on Skype. I got her up on the roof, and I got her on within a matter of a couple of hours, which is far faster than our crew could ever get on the ground. I also managed to find a boat that during the tsunami got flipped over, set on fire, landed on an island, and the captain was up the top of a tree for 3 hours. I found that from his brother talking to himself on YouTube. So what I realized is you can get halfway around the world faster, that this internet thing, even though I don't have the logistics team and the infrastructure of a multinational news channel, I can report faster than they can, and that's what CNN was known for. And so I decided from there that news gathering was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to look on the wires, I didn't want to look off press releases. And so I started using a lot of online resources for Twitter at that point. What happened was I got used to using a piece of software that then changed. A lot of the startups failed and the code disintegrated and I couldn't use their product anymore. A lot of the time they did well and went behind a paywall, or they changed a lot. And so I likened it to a ground crew going out to report on something and you're given different cameras every single time. And as a journalist, that's what worried me. One, I wasn't in control of the tools I was using. And two, I couldn't reproduce what I had done. And because I was doing something new, I was asked to report to Atlanta. My boss was actually in Atlanta in the headquarters of CNN. How I managed to do things and to write reports, and that kept on changing. And that concerned me, because it meant I was the only person staying on top of things, and it meant the journalists would just see me as doing that, and I would do that for the rest of my life. I would have no space for growth, and I would have no space to then teach them to do it themselves, because I saw that as that's what they should be doing as well. They shouldn't have one person dedicated to it. They should start using these tools because they're unbelievably powerful. So I quit CNN to learn to code at a startup called ScraperWiki. They hadn't had funding at the time. They got funding towards the end of my time there. That same year, the Knight Foundation funded Mozilla to start the Open News program, to put fellows in news organizations, and these fellows were supposed to be technologists. I had only just started to learn to code. I was doing some things very, very basic, and I didn't think I had a chance, but I wanted to participate because all of their activities and their hack days was the sort of stuff that I was doing at CNN because I was only working part-time. So I ended up actually going through and winning. And so I remember having left CNN that Christmas. I talked to my father and he said, well, isn't this what you want to do? You wanted to do journalism. You wanted to be a journalist. Why are you leaving? And I told him that I think there's something missing from journalism that I see growing outside, and that I think that one day that will become part of journalism, and I want to learn it now whilst I have the chance. And within a year, I was put into The Guardian at the interactive team with Mariana. Very luckily, they were an amazing team and they were interdisciplinary and they had programmers and they didn't have me necessarily there programming. And one of the stories that I worked on, the latter stories, has to do with data-driven investigations and computer-assisted reporting. It's getting the big picture in the spotlight, which you can't see from the ground or from an individual source. So whistleblowers are individuals and they have their individual story, which is why the organization or the department they belong to can turn around and say, oh, that was a bad egg. That team they were working from, yeah, but since then we've gotten rid of it and we've put things in place to make sure it's never happened again. It's not, you know, it's not a culture. That's just a bad egg because this person only sees a small part of the entire organization. So I was looking to get quite a big picture, and this has a story to do with US food aid. It is, we worked with the International Development editorial team, and she wanted to trace every single piece of US food aid for 1 year because the Senate committee, the Agriculture Committee was coming before the Senate. And she knows that in spite of the recession where everything was making cuts, one thing that was ring-fenced was the food aid budget. The reason why it was ring-fenced was because they said it supplied work and helped the economy for small farmers in the US. It helped a lot of people in the US. Small farmers used the food aid to subsidize when they weren't getting good sales within the US. And so this information was split across 2 websites because they had an old website and a new website last year. They were procurement reports that were just which organization got money for how much food. But I had to go and find shipping reports from when they left the dock to find their destination country and other information. So this was split across PDFs, text files, CSVs. It was an incredibly hairy mess. But I managed to piece together, of course, with the help of the international development team and the interactive team, we pieced together almost all of it. And we found that it's the big agri-businesses that are using food aid almost as income support and welfare. It's not the small agri-businesses. It's not the small farmers. It's the large multinational agri-businesses. So we ended up, So we ended up actually with an interactive that told a story, first and foremost, and it named particular giant agri-businesses and how much they got. Because we were naming companies, even though we were using government data, we were naming companies. What happened was these companies decided to come down hard and threaten us because they have PR. They didn't even know this themselves because they don't have a full picture. The reason why we did this is because we know the Senate committee, the Agricultural Department, the US Food Aid, and these companies don't have this data because it's split across. I had to find it, I had to track it, I had to join it. So we found all of it. The vast majority of it, we ended up finding it. And what I learned from this is the benefits of programming to dig data, because the businesses came to the editors and they said, we want this cut. We're going to take you to court, and we want you to show us exactly what you did, because we piece everything together. And in a traditional investigative newsroom, when you're doing stuff by hand, it will take months, not only months to do, but if you reproduce it, it will take months to do. And a lot of the time, the editors will back off because they cannot afford for you to do it again. I had the program. I had everything I did written down programmatically, and I gave that to them. I said, you run this, you run that, get a developer. This is absolutely transparent what we did, and you can reproduce all of it. And they backed off. They didn't go forward with their complaint. And that, for me, is using programming for a journalistic basis. So the system that I use now is one is reproducible if you're ever taken to court, 2 is self-documenting, and 3 is completely transparent. And that is that's not something you're told to do in computer science. The things that they tell you to do as a programmer is backing things up, making different versions, having things, structuring it in the right place. I've developed it thinking about journalism for journalism's sake. And that's what I find that you can do with programming, that if you do something by hand, not only will it take you longer, but reproducing it in court is exceedingly difficult, and it's really long drawn out. And mostly, if you show them you've done it this way, they get scared and they back off. So what have I done now at the Times? This was a fellowship for 10 months. Since then, I've become a data journalist at the data journalism team at the Times Sunday Times, working with editorial, doing investigative work. So one of the early projects that I did was working with prescriptions data. Prescriptions data in the UK is very, very well documented. It is one of the cleanest, largest medical sets you can get your hands on, and it's 2 gigs a month. A year's worth of data is 12 million rows. And traditionally, when the journalists thought prescriptions data is being opened, oh my God, I need to take a look at that. And what did they try and do? They tried to open it in Excel. Excel won't open anything that's 2 gigs. It's too big. Google spreadsheets won't open it. Even a visualization thing like Tableau, it won't open it. It's far too big. So I can program. My computer can look at it. I can look at it line by line. So I looked into it. I downloaded 60 gigs worth of data, and we filtered it, and we looked at stories for different types of prescriptions. The interesting thing about looking through these stories is that we noticed something. We noticed something interesting about the data. So prescriptions data is anonymized. But I found 5 different data sets and managed to join them such that we could get it down to the exact GP. We couldn't then report exact GP ones because that's an invasion of privacy. So we then aggregated that up a level to local authority area or district area. And we were able then to map all these different things. And so when we ended up mapping this, we wanted to normalize it by the size of the population. And then from there we found that there's 2 million more patients than there are population. And what we did is we had a story on ghost patients. 2 million ghost patients costing the NHS £450 million. Interestingly enough, when we looked into it, there was reports made by a third party for the NHS that brought up this anomaly, and then there were further reports saying how they need to tackle it. But because this was never in a press release, no one ever found it. But we found it in the data, and we were able to then map it. And so we ended up not only with investigative story, unique story, but then local news organizations asked us for their part of the data and tried to take it on further. And so the reason why I think this story matters to you here is because we have had freedom of information for a while in the UK, and our journalists have had to get used to it. But you are getting Freedom of Information Act here, or it's new. Hopefully I got that correct. But what happens is that the problem is no longer too little information, but too much. What they do is they end up throwing you out a deluge of data. So transparency does not mean they can't hide the issue. They just can't hide it in a deluge of data. So being able to tackle it, and being able to tackle any format that comes out, was just beating them at their own game, which is what I like doing. So very quickly, I'm just going to go through what you can do, not necessarily to learn to code, to not be frightened, and to do things that I've done, that Mariana has done, that lots of news organizations have done. It's very, very simple steps. Take risks. I left CNN to learn to code, and I said, I think I see this as something big, it's what I want to do. Mariana has taken risks. Try new things. Do not be afraid of anything new. Get your hands on anything that you can learn. There's an online game called Code Combat where you learn JavaScript by being dwarves with axes and having to pick it up and fight people. That, for me, is fun. I do things, learning to code, I will do things made for kids. It doesn't matter. Use your imagination. If you, from doing something simple, you can imagine how to apply it to your work, that is the most important thing. It's not being able to do it. It's being able to think about how you can apply that to any little thing that you're doing. And most importantly, you will figure it out. So above all, to not be afraid, to counteract fear, you need patience, you need support, and you need motivation. So that's the sort of thing that Chicas Poderosas and those sort of organizations and the Open Knowledge Foundation and all the various millions of things that MAR runs, that's what they really provide, is an outlet and an opportunity for you to find like-minded people and use things like Google, always search for things, but you're a journalist, ask questions, and ask questions to people. Most importantly, you need to find your own way. I have digital interns that I teach to scrape or to code, and after their internship they come up to me and say, give me a long list of everything I need to do next to be just like you. And I say no. I say, that's counterintuitive to what you want. You have to be self-motivated. You have to find things that interest you. So you really have to find your own way, not as a person and not just as an institution, but as a culture and a country. I hate going to Latin America and people saying, I saw this thing in the New York Times, can we do that? It's like, the New York Times is American. Is that what your people want? Is that what they understand? Latin America has a massive, massive intelligence for visualization because culturally they do a lot of things with pictures and with colors, and a lot of rural parts there is illiteracy. So even their voting cards, everyone has a symbol. Everything is, they carve it onto mountains, they cut it into their farms, the symbol of their candidate. They understand visualization much more than the UK does. And then also, like I said, ask questions, and with that, you should ask me questions. Oh, I need this thing.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one is how to know when you need to tell the story with more than words. And the second is, so you think that data is not enough for all the stories, or it depends on the subject you are writing for?
So firstly, I would like all stories to be told with not just words. I would not like to limit myself. That being said, I am a data-driven investigative journalist, and I work for an organization that is ingrained in print. And the way I sell it is that I'm looking to get a story. It can be a headline in just a written piece. It allows me to do my work. If they think that I'm someone that only builds things, that will frighten a lot of journalists, because they don't want to do that. They want to do their job, and they don't see how what I do applies to them. So I need to show them that I will find you stories that you can write about. But after I've gone and found it, and I've got lots of information, I see how much more can be done with it. And I prefer to do it that way. A lot of that work I take on myself, and our digital team does that as part of our remit. So to educate the journalists, you have to play their game. So I say, right, you will write a story, but we will build something for you as well. And oftentimes they don't care about what's being built until you put something in front of them. And then they have all sorts of opinions and want to change everything, but it gets them involved. Data for me it's very important. Data is not numbers. I work with a statistician. I have a background in maths and physics. I like numbers, but I will work with raw PDFs and text. So I code in Python, and it does a lot of natural language processing. So, for instance, I've had to look for all the companies in the MPs or our politicians' register of interest, and I needed to go and fetch everything they're saying in Parliament and on Twitter and search for that. That's data. So people will come, traditionally a lot of the journalists will come to me with numbers, and I have to kind of tell them data is not just numbers, it really is just information. Any other questions? Spanish or English?
English is fine.
Okay.
So how do you work at the times? Like you get a bunch of data and you propose to the journalist, or the journalist goes to the data team and says, I know something, is gonna get out. Can we work on it and find an angle, or how that's and can you tell me how are you organized? Like what is the data team, and what and if you have journalists being part of it, or how you work within the newsroom?
Okay, after this we're going to have a roundtable discussion with myself and Mariana about exactly that, but just very briefly, there's 3 of us, 2 girls, 1 guy, so we're mostly female. A traditional journalist, I'm a journalist programmer, he is a doctorate in statistics. We have told our boss, we work with the digital team, they work across 2 newspapers, but we told them that we're not sitting with you, we're sitting on the editorial floor. And so I think you'll get much more in depth when we have a roundtable discussion. And then I think there was a question there as well afterwards. Yeah.
Hello, good morning. You work in legacy media right now. You worked before in a startup, I think. So how do you manage your frustrations working in legacy media, and what motivations do you find in working in these big media?
I find handling things involves bitching at the water cooler with your colleagues and pulling your hair out, as per usual. I have an amazing team. So the people I work with are similar age to me, and we are best of friends, and I know everything about their love life. I tell them horrible stories of my mum visiting, all this sort of stuff. We tease each other, we mess around. And that's what really helps, actually, is the personal relationship with the people you work with closely. I also have an editor who has been at the Sunday Times for 5 years. And within that time, she's done what's really beneficial for the team, getting to know everyone. And she is the best in terms of managing, that she, not only does she manage what we do, she manages our relations with everyone else because they know her. But there's all sorts of educating to be done, and I think with the roundtable discussion we'll talk about sort of integrating things. But in terms of dealing with frustration, with computer stuff, you end up bashing your head a lot. Luckily I have support in terms of the people I work with at ScraperWiki are still on chat, and they'll still help me with things. I have a lot of meetup groups that I go to, and again, like Chicas Poderosas, it's about finding mentors. So the person that he works on the technology side of my organization. I met him at the first ever Hacks Hackers in the UK, where I had no idea of what coding even was, and he was the first person to take out his computer and show me. And so I catch up with him almost every week, and we just chat, and that's what's really important.
You said already that we have to search for it ourselves, but have you got any suggestions on specific programs we should be learning, courses we should attend, some sort of, I don't know.
It's not about what is out there, it's about what you want to do. So what I tell every digital intern and student journalist that's interested in doing any sort of programming is there's two different types of programming and two different types of data journalist. There's a front-end developer and a front-end data journalist, a back-end developer and a back-end data journalist. Front-end is what the audience sees. It's forward-facing, it's visualization, it's building long-form articles, it's working with a browser, it's working with tablet. You're given all of the assets and you design. It's very much about design and visualization. If that is what you're interested in, if that's what really motivates you, then in that case you want a front-side programming language, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that is, to a certain extent, you have an environment with which you can just write code and see what it looks like, and that's your browser. There is a lot, in fact there's too many courses about that because it's so popular. The best thing to do is to learn the basics of programming with, I find there's like almost like a kids earning badges type thing called Codecademy that will take you through the basics of things. After you know the basics, don't do a course. Think about what you've learned, how you can apply it to what you do. Build a basic pie chart, build a basic bar chart, and just keep on at it until you get something out of it. I was told, don't sit and do MOOCs and online courses. Do one until you're comfortable with the syntax. Go out and make things. It's just like a craftsman has to see a master make a masterpiece and try it himself over and over and over again. So to create something you have to learn you have to create. So don't sit and think you're being educated, just keep on trying to make things. If you're interested in what I do, so data-driven investigation, scraping data, cleaning data, putting it into databases, analyzing it, that's more of a back-end developer and a back-end data journalist. So rather than browser-based front-facing. For that, there's two programming languages that are popular in the newsroom that are both the same. There's Ruby and Python. I'm a Pythonist because ScraperWiki are Pythonists, and that's my heritage. What I would say is that if you're interested in working for a newsroom, or if your newsroom already uses something, find out what there is. So New York Times had a bit of both and then decided, right, we're being a Ruby house and we're asking everyone to code in Ruby. The Python and Ruby are like Spanish and Portuguese. So it's very easy to translate between them, so don't think you're stuck with one. What I would say is the most important thing is to find a community that suits your personality. So even though languages, the basics are all the same, what makes them different is the community around them, i.e. they're using it for something in particular. Ruby have a thing called Ruby on Rails, which makes them quite webby, quite web apps. So NPR and stuff like that, they do a lot of one-off apps, and that is mostly done in Ruby. Python has a heritage in hardcore science and statistics. So the Genome Project, that's all done in Python. Anything coming out of large scientific community and big data stuff, that's in Python. So to a certain extent, I'm happy that I'm a Pythonist because I feel more connected to the science community because I did science as my undergraduate. But The advice I was given when I first learned, which still holds true, is the most difficult language to learn is your first. Because after that, it's like Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. You just need to learn a bit of the syntax. So pick one and learn that one quite well.
Thank you.
Yeah. That done? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for having it in English.
Vamos a interrumpir ahora unos 20 minutos.
We're going to interrupt the process for a coffee break, and we will be back with the round table.
Bueno, buenas. Creo que...
Okay, I think we can start. If no one tells me cut, I think we can start. Well, thank you very much for staying after this break, this coffee break that I hope it's been fruitful for you, and you have used it to meet new people, to develop new projects, and we can have you here next year presenting or introducing these new projects that you have done thanks to these meetings. Let's talk about how generating stories and working with data, how data can help to generate content. And we have Nicola and Mariana. I think it's not necessary to introduce them because most of you have been here in the morning, but we also have a special guest that I'm very thankful that she's here, who's Noemi Ramirez. She's the director of digital product, in El País, that is a newspaper here in Spain. But beyond the position and the responsibility that she has within the digital products that are developed in one of the main media of our country, I think it's very good to have Noemi here today because she is pioneer in data journalism. I think around 1990, whatever. She moved to the US to study data journalism, and the reality of that moment wasn't the reality of today. And well, let's imagine if I was telling you that 2 or 3 years ago we were looked as if we were weird talking about data sheets. When she went back, just figure out the reality that she found. Some of us we have been fighting to develop interesting digital projects in Spain. So what we're going to do, the format of this roundtable, is that everyone speaks for 10 or 15 minutes. Noemi will show some slides of her works. She will talk about how to use data to develop the product, and Mariana and Nicola will answer a little bit more in detail to that question of the question that is how they work with data within their newsroom or within their works. What is the process so that we can learn and maybe adapt it to our reality here in Spain. Then we will do a brief question, and we will give you the floor, so be ready so that we can be shooting. Please prepare a brief and direct question so that we can interact as much as possible. With Mariana, you can be all the evening, but Nicola will leave at 3 p.m. to Barcelona, so let's do it now. And the last thing that I have to say is that the hashtag to tweet, JPB14, it's important to know that everything is tweeted JPB14. Okay? That's quite easy. And, well, Noemi, you have the floor. How can we develop products thanks to data? Well, thank you very much for your attendance, Mark, for the introduction, and for all the work of the organization, together with all the sponsors. I will change the preposition of data journalism with the preposition of and. I will talk about journalism and data, as Mar has said, and has, although I asked her not to say the exact year, I moved to the US in 1997 with a scholarship to specialize myself in data journalism. It's with one of the main organizations in the investigation, in the research journalism of what was known as journalism through PC or whatever. I was during 7 years in El Mundo, that is another newspaper here in Spain. I moved to the Prisa group, and since December last year I'm working at El País in the development of digital products, which is quite complex to explain what its function is and what are we working on. In that sense, when I talk to one of my bosses, well, I have quite many, but when I told one of my bosses that I was going to take part in these meetings, he told me not to use the word not to use the word hinge at the time of talking about this. He told me to do it just more direct way. So in this way, I'm going to talk about with a metaphor of a periscope, because you are forced to look all over in all the directions. When you launch a new product, you are forced to work with all the departments of the company, not only with the department responsible of the editorial proposals that are the heart of all that's coming next, but with the objective that that project is successful. You have to look at areas like, for example, technology area, networks, social networks area, so that you can assure that everyone is moving towards the same direction, that we have identified a common goal, and that will be a key and a guarantee of the success. When you're thinking about a proposal of product definition, you have to answer many questions, and I'll laugh at for example, when you're trying to ask for a simple hamburger in the US, but the kind of questions that we face when we have some idea and we want to assess the viability of that idea, first of all, we have to answer a batch of questions, like, for example, and first of all, who will be the goal group? Who will be the recipients of this products? It will it be interesting or not? What kind of content can it include? Depending on the content, we can extract conclusions, or we can identify what's going to be interesting for people. Not only those readers with whom we have established a relationship, but also to a number of people that initially is a mass that we can quantify quite good, but that we consider that can bet on us and to keep a relationship with us. We're not talking only about content regarding issues. We are thinking about new narrative, new issues, new things. It's a product that will have a general character, or does it have to focus specific needs of a niche community? Which will be the strategic goals? And this has to work with the business model that we want to develop from that product. How are we going to distribute it? Which will be our opportunities of giving which will be the possibilities of developing this project? Will it be a product that is conceptualized for being a mobile product, or will we use a mobile channel as an alternative way to distribute the content that we are generating on other support? Will it be a payment model? Will it be a register? Do we have the adequate technology or not? If we don't have the adequate technology, how are we going to answer to those problems or needs? Will it be through own developments, through alliances with third parties? Which kind of integrations are we going to need so that we can establish a functional architecture, and that all the modules that support the product can talk between them, and they can guarantee a good experience for the user? And finally, how are we going to measure the success or the fail of this new product? These are some questions in which to be able to answer them, we need to work not only with the content area that will be the responsible of making the definition of the editorial proposal, but also from the content area to the business area, we'll have to handle with many teams. We have been talking about the concept of having interdisciplinary teams for stories told with data, but that statement should be applied to the product creation and to the media creation in digital environments. Well, the departments are not isolated anymore, and there's a huge amount of knowledge that is not property of a team, no matter it is there where the expertise is. So we have to work with technology, basic. That's a milestone in what we want to do. If I say technology, we say design design, if you say design, we say analytics, we say social networks with all the team that we have to define the social strategy, and in particular interested areas, the mobility area.
Importantísima. Y cuando hablo de analítica no me refiero exclusivamente a aquellos.
I'm not referring exclusively with analysis to those teams that are generalized or that are installed in most editorial rooms in Spanish media, because analytics is of capital importance because it is integrated in each and every one of the phases of definition and product development. And when the idea is conceptualized, when it takes shape, and when a product is beginning to be defined, that is when we have to respond to all and many other questions that we've seen before, and then we go on to construction, and there we have to incorporate elements which will subsequently allow us to observe how well or how badly things are done, and we have to reach a point which we tend to forget, and I think that is one of the essential points, and that is to identify indicators and metrics that will subsequently be the keystones for measuring the process. And finally, with that information that these metrics will be giving to us, we'll be able to carry out a good analysis and a good conversion, and to get a whole series of know-how with learned lessons that will help us and that will feed back the process cycle and the definition of the product, ideas that will help us to develop contents and business ideas subsequently. As I was saying, the analysis or analytics teams, should be strong, using external tools or own tools, should be able to measure the impact of the content production in terms of the sites that have been visited, of unique users, that is a translator of the single search engines, and it can use metrics like visits, the number of fans or followers, to be able to quantify the life, the hits, the distribution through social networks, to be able to see our direct accesses, to be able to identify the points of connection to our contents, and to glean conclusions with regards to the organizational structures. And these kinds of metrics that are metrics, vanity metrics, as they have been called by some people, because indeed it is a question of showing off. And so in these shares of the pie internally, they help us to, for example, study or to be able to get conclusions with regards to a part on the portal is working as well as the previous parts of the main page. And this is what we have in the editorial room, and it's not generally used, but it accumulates information, and there are elements of the access that have had contents that were occupied in each of these modules, and that is able to give an average score. And with each change on the portal, on the main page, will have its own qualification. Green means that it's above the average, so at least it's a good or very good, and red is below the average, in other words it's a fail or not even a scraped pass, and yellow is close to a pass or scraped pass. And these are views that allow you or help you, and then it is an editorial decision subsequently for the front page, but it can help you when you take decisions with regards to what visibility you want to give to what contents. Perhaps you want to have an important component for your editorial decisions, but when you have other kinds of doubts, these kinds of tools can help you to decide, depending on the rate of or the degree of interest awoken among readers. And then there are other real-time tools to assess whether a headline is generating more impact than another. And here I'm not referring to having an easy headline, which we all know, without having to do any sophisticated measurements, but really to see two similar styles of drafting of a headline, which can be translated more efficiently in terms of hits on the site. And obviously here we can also obtain information with regards to the profile of our average reader. These are public data based on the results of ComScore in January 2014, and with internal tools we can also generate visual graphics, and these are quite straightforward things. But this is a graph with two axes. One represents the audience from PC browsers, and the other one is for tablets and mobile devices. And it's got two axes because here, although it appears in some cases that the mobile is above the PC, it's not the case. The PC is still the majority use device, but we are noticing that in certain times of day, particularly when you travel to or when you're commuting to or from the office, and with more relaxed reading times after the day at work, and generally the market is observing some increases in access from mobile devices, and this is really very strong, and they are rivaling the PCs, and so you can get conclusions and you can see whether your product is adapted to mobile devices, or is it just a replica of what is available on the web for a PC. And these are some of the conclusions that could be obtained from these kinds of investigations. So we've talked about vanity metrics and about quantitative metrics, and the metrics that I'm most interested in personally are the qualitative metrics or measurements, and these are beginning to arrive and to make their way in this huge volume of data that can be overwhelming. And so we're talking here about things like depth in the reading of the context. We're talking about whether we're able to attract readers and for them to come back, so that they're not just parachuted readers who land there through a browser and never come back because you haven't been able to hook them or to convey something that really will want them to come back and to establish a relationship with you. We're also talking about the impact of these contents on our audience, on our readers, and how we can have objective measurements of those impacts, and how can we, in an ideal world, how can we assess whether there are actions that have been triggered by the impact of these contents on readers. And so in that sense it is important also for us to know that with the analysis of these contents and the patterns of browsing among our readers, we're also able to process in real time, for example, in one day, for example, 17 million lines, which correspond to 17 million hits or accesses, and to compare or cross them with the taxonomy, the organizational taxonomy of the contents that exists on elpaís.com, which has been done since 2010 to 2012, and this was one of the transformation levers in the editorial room. This is a system of contents organization which far beyond offering or finding information or browsing or searching within the structure of elpaís.com. We can turn it around and use those tags and those theme headings to cross with access and to identify niche communities and unique users that are interested in certain subjects. And we can only do that by crossing or comparing the data of the 17 million of code lines that Ramon Rivero, who's in charge of technological development says it in a very natural way, but if you stop and think about it, really it is a huge volume of information that is very important, very significant, useful, and we compare that with the data that we have in the taxonomy. And so in this way we can identify more general communities and much more specific niche communities. And this has a whole series of impacts in our decision making for our content strategy. It can have an impact in the definition of new business models derived from the interest inferred from and awoken through those browsing habits. And if we translate that to a model in which we are able to isolate within the audience not just the user but also to get to know the user in a much more direct way, for example through systems like, for example, the registering processes or subscription processes, we can begin to understand really what are the needs of the individual profile and of the direct reader. Now, it's not just a question of a person who belongs to a group, but it becomes a person and an individual as such. And so some of the lessons that we have learned, and I'm very pleased that Lide Aguirre is here. She's the assistant director of the País, and in the editorial room she's tried to encourage the development of data journalism or visualization through training courses that she's organized, through talks, awareness-raising talks that have been organized, and she really has backed and she was the leader of a project that was launched in January this year, on the 16th of January, which is called Future Planet, Planeta Futuro. It's a project done with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the objective is to generate contents with regards to subjects that are directly related with the objectives of the United Nations Millennium. And apart from that, which has an important value for publishing, and that gives you something to research and to do new narrative techniques. And this has a component which I think is much more interesting and which has a great value because it allows us to work with a spin-off from the Autónoma University of Madrid, specialized in linguistic analysis, and we are working, as I say, hand-to-hand or shoulder-to-shoulder with them to define an analytical framework that will allow us to identify the impact among our readers of the subjects that are being published within the context of the Planeta Futuro context or ecosystem. We have the results of the first 2 months of the analysis. In these 2 months we have identified already some lessons or conclusions that can help us, I think, to consider certain things, to be more sure about others, and to be surprised also by other things. And among them is the first is that we found clues in order to be able to detect possible distancing signals between some of the contents that we produce and the dominant interests in the conversations of the audience, but not just the audience of Planeta Futuro, Future Planet, but also the audience that is liable to be interested in those subjects that are being dealt with within Planeta Futuro. And this that you see now on the screen is a cloud of labels that show you the weight of different entities and different key words in the comments, in the tweets that talk about the contents of Planeta Futuro. Here, El País and Planeta Futuro, Future Planet, are very dominant because we're at the time of launch, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. It's been launched, it's been circulated, and this is being done. And if we compare this with the conversation forums in Twitter, in Facebook, and YouTube, and YouTube and blogs, which have some editorial link, we observe that the two main subjects that have dominated the conversation are fundamentally AIDS and dengue fever, and we haven't really contributed that much. But what we have contributed with is in this product that was generated. It is a map using data from the World Malaria Report, and it shows the epidemiological situation at the present, diagnosed deaths, supposed cases. This has had greater circulation, it has created greater conversation, but perhaps it hasn't had more impact, because what has had most impact has been women's rights, where really we have positioned ourselves as a player that is pretty active in conversations about these questions. The concept of awareness raising is measured with specific vocabulary, with active listening of the conversation. Expressions like I don't care, or this is shameful, or there's no right to do this, would be catalogued as expressions of negative feeling or sentiment. For us, these kinds of expressions are indicative of the fact that there is a high level of awareness, but expressions like I don't care, or it's irrelevant, or I'm not bothered, are expressions that we give a low awareness, because it means that the people who read it really don't give a damn about it, and they will not get involved in any particular action in order to change that situation. And another kind of project that we have, these are more daily projects. Planeta Futuro, Future Planet, is a 2-year project with a scope of 2 years, and so there's a lot left to do to continue to learn and to improve and to evolve it. But another kind of project that, let's say, which is more close to the daily news and to editorial production and beyond its publication phase, offers you a view to be able to understand the behavior, and that can also give you a series of information that you include in the subsequent evolution. Is the 11M special, and working with the social strategy was to include something very simple, which was to include the option to share in Twitter the stories that were included in the section of places to recall. What we followed in the monitoring of this in social networks was that the readers consumed it in a compulsive form, and they shared it in a chain. And in this way, the next special, strong, which was created, which just a couple of weeks ago, and that is this one about immigration and the different frontiers and gates in Europe, is to go a step further. Instead of offering the option to share with regards to the story or the complete blog, we've done a small development and working, and this is the closest to interdisciplinary work, working with the design group and working with the development group, also working with the social network group and working also with the editorial group there, without any need of their existing mandate or an organizational a clear organizational, but in a natural way, because that is a natural process for work. What we did, as I said, was to develop, to identify the phrase which we thought could be have the greatest impact and the greatest distribution. This has given us really great results. And finally, I wanted to give you a conclusion, or come to a conclusion about a very simple, straightforward thing. We were the first medium where we shared contents through WhatsApp and from the mobile web and from the classic web, from a mobile device. And we're observing now how the contents are being shared with WhatsApp, with the notion that we can manage that WhatsApp is where we can discuss whether it is a social network or not. That's not what I'm interested in, really. But what I am interested in is WhatsApp app as a window and to reach more people. And what we're observing, therefore, is that although things are shared in a compulsive way through the day, the reading is done later on in the day. It may be because we all associate WhatsApp to an immediate response. And what we are observing is that the timeline loses its significance when you share the contents, or at least our contents, and WhatsApp is done as a deposit of contents, as a reading list, and this will give us some clues in order to be able to subsequently develop new ideas. And with that, I give it to you, give it over to you, and for your questions, I am open, and once the other speakers have responded to the internal organizational processes. Let's thank Noémie with a round of applause. And really, I think there is something that is very important to stress, and to generate new know-how, we have to share what we know. And I would like to thank you personally, Noémie, for having come here and for opening that window of what El País is doing and what you have seen does work and what does not work. I think in Spain we don't share enough, and I think this is a heroic thing, and in other places they do it more. And so what you know, we would like you to share it, because we can generate contents, and that is why I would give the floor to Nicola now to tell us. And we have Noémie at one end, and I place them sitting in this way because Noémie is to the extreme of how can we do what we really do with all of our effort, and for it not to end up being forgotten or thrown in the rubbish bin. But we also have to have people like Nicola at the other end of the generating things. And so tell us a little bit how you work in the Times, and what are the processes in order to be able to get to this point.
Okay, so after my talk, people wanted to know about the setup at the Times. And I also wanted to stress that in my talk I also said to find your own way. So this is an example of not necessarily how we found best to do it, but just how we ended up doing it. And there's many different ways to skin a cat. The interesting thing is that I work across two newspapers, and although they're called the Times and the Sunday Times, they have to be treated legally as two completely separate entities. So if you think of the politics that goes on in one newsroom, imagine having to work across two and making sure that we don't tell one newsroom what we're doing with the other newsroom. So there's always a horrendous amount of politics involved, as with everywhere. So I sit with the digital team, which sits across both titles. They consist of developers, managers, and a visualization team. They tend to be pulled in very many different directions. So sometimes they're fixing things that are actually technology's job, which is things like the app crashing, actual IT infrastructure. Sometimes they end up having to do things for marketing in terms of making their ads or visualization interactive. Although technically I sit under that frame, myself and the two other data journalists on our team, we sit with editorial. We have two editorials to sit with. Because the Times is a 6-day paper, we sit with them Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. On Wednesday we sit with the Sunday Times, because if they're producing a lot of content on a Sunday, Wednesday is the only time to actually get something in. This was mostly pioneered by our editor. Her name is Megan Lucero. She is definitely a chicas porrosa. She was a researcher at the Times and working under editorial mostly on the foreign desk. When editorial jobs came to be cut, her job was on the chopping board, and she proposed data journalism team. And because of that, she has made sure that we sit with editorial. So even though we're part of digital, we sit with editorial, but are also slightly separated in that we're not answerable to their daily meetings and we're not answerable to their editors. But it is very important that we get them on board. So what she did is she organized for us to give talks, and because journalists work different times, we had to do the same talk at 4 different times to make sure we could cover as much people as possible. She brought this idea to the deputy editor of the Times called Emma Tucker, and Emma made sure that she emailed people beforehand and told them they had to come. Integrating with the newsroom is part of our remit. We are not allowed to be like the data blog from The Guardian. We are not a separate unit producing separate content that sits on a separate section of the site. Part of the digital remit is to encourage and to educate the newsroom. Therefore, we sit with editorial, we work with editorial. The interesting thing about editorial is that if you are to work with something, it has to be in the newspaper. So we have to pitch and work on things at the same level as they do. Even though we work on the web and therefore space is unlimited, technically our space is limited in terms of getting the story. We can add more content online, we can add an interactive online. Space is not the problem. But we can't have something online that is not in the paper. So there is, well, some might see that as a negative, but the positive is that we have to fight on the same level as they do. So we can't look at a story, make a bar chart, and a simple headline. It has to be decent enough to get in the paper. A lot of what they like and what we offer them is original content, which they can sit on if they want to. A lot of what we've done, they've given us a possible deadline to fill space, but they will keep it if they think they need to get more information or if we need to build an interactive. That is a big stepping stone for us. In terms of challenges, a big challenge is production. So a lot of journalism, traditional journal systems have a very regimental production line. It goes to this person, then it has to go through that person. The pictures come in at this point, the copy editors come in at this point, the headline is written at this point. With every story we do and we build, there isn't a set production system, and getting it through the system is like pulling teeth. We have to make sure we have to constantly be on people's shoulders, asking them, tapping them, reminding them, any technical stuff. You can't leave an email and expect people to pick it up. So our editor, even though she's away over Easter, some stories came out, she had to make sure she emailed people. She checks stuff before it comes out. If there's something wrong, she has to phone them up. We have had to work late, mostly for production issues. That is a massive challenge to introducing anything new in a system. The biggest advantage or the best advice I can give, and that's what I've noticed at The Guardian, and that's what I've noticed has worked the best where I am now, is you need an advocate. You need someone whose job is totally to drive things. Someone whose job is to chase people, someone whose job is to find out who are the best ears to talk to, find out what they want to hear, and to tell it to them. So Alistair Dant started that team. He was in charge of hiring. He was leading it, and then he had to battle with the executives above him and keep those people away from everyone else so that they could get on with their work. Megan Lucero is just a battler because she proposed the team in order to save her job, and she also really is full of energy and believes in what she does. If you force it on someone, if you pick someone who's getting on in years and you can't find how they sit in the system, and they'll kind of go, oh, we'll make you digital editor, you can do that, there's no point in doing that. You need someone to step up to the plate. You need someone to say, I am determined to drive this. I will stay up at night. I will email people. I will badger people. Thrusting something new or something digital upon someone is a very, very bad idea. I would also say it's very difficult to get people outside your institution in, because a lot of the times if they're developers and designers, they're paid better elsewhere, and they're bigger and better names to go to. There's Google and Facebook and Twitter. And they are not just competing for your audience, they're competing for your potential employees. So that has been a huge difficulty, because whenever there is space, especially on high, they tend to look within their own organization. But getting new, fresh blood in, one, is very difficult, but two, is a huge advantage someone who thinks, breathes, and has worked digital, that someone on high who's an executive that doesn't necessarily know how to code but knows how to use their phone. You'd be surprised how many executives that call themselves digital that can't update their apps. They are journalists that cannot open an email attachment, and those are the people that are promoted because they are the people that do a lot of talking. And that's the case sort of everywhere. I'm not saying data journalism and this stuff is all new. You won't find anyone with experience. You won't be able to poach Aaron Pilhofer from the New York Times. So you have to look outside your organization, but not necessarily at the job they do, but how they interact with people. And you have to find someone who knows other people to try and start hiring. So the reason I have ended up with the Times is because when I was at CNN and doing work outside of my work hours, and when I mean work, I mean going to meetups, finding anything that I could learn. One of them was a free mapping course that was done by the Royal Geographical Society. It began with talks, and one of the guys who talked there is a guy called Christopher Osborne, who does amazing visualizations for companies. He is a manager, he's a freelancer, he gets paid a lot. So the head of digital at the Times had proposed to make a digital team that didn't exist. And so he needed to find someone a bit like Alistair Dant. And he decided it was Christopher Osborne. So he went to him and proposed the idea. He didn't end up coming because he earns so much money. We just could not pay him. But he said, I want to hire my own team. Here are the names. I was a name on that because I met him at a random mapping course, and we just started talking about what we believed was the right way. So you need to find someone with your same beliefs that goes out and goes to meetings and goes and headlines and heads things like Chicas Poderosas, like the conference that we're having in Barcelona, that knows people from the Open Knowledge Foundation, because they will end up just talking to people and realizing, okay, this person, they're working for a freelance ad agency, but they understand what it is that we are trying to do. I will get them in and they'll learn journalism on the job. They also need then to be able to look internal and see which journalists are ripe to be put in part of that team. One thing we have done is we did a hackathon for students, journalism students, because we were offering a student sort of a package aimed towards students, but as part of that, we then had a discussion of who we're going to pick from the newsroom and tell them and make sure their line manager gives them the day off to go. So doing events within your organization, bring people from your organization there and headhunt who were the right people to then put in. And other than that, we work quite regimentally. In terms of our own stories, we have to get something in the paper, we have to work with journalists. At the moment, they have been sometimes proposing things and we work on that. So the ghost patient story was our own story because we found it whilst working on something else. And that's the interesting thing about data journalism, is after you've done the analysis, you end up finding things, you end up finding anomalies because you have to clean it for something else. In terms of what Mariana said of being able to fail, because we're new, failing is an issue for us. I told them kind of straight away, if we try big, we will fail big and we will be put back months in terms of getting people on board. We need to win a good few small battles in quick succession to get people and journalists and the team and the editorial teams interested in what we do. But in that sense, we ended up not necessarily with big successes, but one of the things is they realized that whilst we're looking at something for them, we find something else in it. They realize that they can sit on this story until they've got more information. One thing they really like is on a slow news day, when they have pages to fill. That's what's horrifying. News organizations can deal with too much news on the same day. They have that really well structured. It's when there's no news. That's when they panic. That's when they don't know what to do and are looking at the latest survey on which dogs like which dog food or something like that. And dreadful press releases come out. They hate that. We can give them things that they can sit on and fill those things with those times that are completely exclusive to them. But again, look into your own organization. Think about what the people who has the power to make change, what they like. To a certain extent, you have to play the system to get anything done. But most importantly, you really, really need a champion, and that can be you. So Alistair Dant was employed from outside of The Guardian. Megan Lucero was there 5 years working as a researcher, and she just ballsily said, let's do this in order to save her job. And she is our champion, and we would get nothing done if it wasn't for her. So an executive is good because you don't want to continuously battle the people up top, but you can be your own champion. And Megan does not code, and she does not do statistics. I code, Stefano does statistics. We all work as a team. And very importantly, when we first started, I suggested that we have a joint byline, because byline is the currency in our organization. People only take you seriously if you have bylines. So we all, because even if I do all the work, Megan organizes everything and keeps people off my back. Stefano double checks everything that I do, or I can run things by him in terms of the analysis I'm doing. Therefore, we always have a Times data team, Sunday Times data team byline on everything we do, and at the bottom our individual names, so that one, we know we're working as a team, but two, the rest of the organization don't know of a person, they know of an entity, and that's the sort of things where you just need to push and push.
Bueno, con ese mensaje vamos.
Well, let's give a big applause with that message. There are people that feel identified with that message. They were listening to Nicola, and I was watching some faces in the public that have felt identified with the thing that Nicola was saying. And finally, last but not least, we have Mariana here. So let's please be brief so that we can give a room for questions. How can you motivate so that we don't make the same article as usual, something innovative and to be successful? So for anyone that doesn't know how we work, we have 3 design teams. Normally, the issues come from the second floor of the newsroom. That is where the journalists are, no matter they are from culture, sports, science, whatever. They are working on an issue, and they go up to the third floor and they come to us. If it's a breaking news, they move to the first team, which is a design team. That when I was there, you're talking about 6 people with the artistic director, and in that team, if you come in the morning with your issue, you enable the designer to have 4 or 5 hours for designing it, and then you can launch it on the page if it's for print. When these issues are developed, you can do it on an interactive way, and there was another team with 8 or 10 people that are the online designers that not only do the look and feel of the page, buttons, symbols. We have to change some iterations that are improvements, and they develop them. A project can be born from a graph that is moved to print and can be very successful, and it's moved to the second group, so that in 2 or 3 groups we can have an interactive animation that has more knowledge, more information. And from there to the third group, that is mine, we were between 5 and 7 depending on the season, and we implemented projects from 3 weeks to 1 month. It's a much longer project that come to us with the idea before developing it. We have a story, we are keeping data, and maybe we'll have a success in a couple of weeks. From the first point we start thinking, how can we tell this story, always involving the journalists. The journalists is like the owner of the project, and one of the members of the team is a project manager. When I got introduced to everyone, I love talking to people, and many times people from multimedia, photography, editors, because editors wanted their project to be on Twitter or whatever, and the part of interaction enables that. As I was saying, it enables us to have public relationships, and many people wanted to collaborate, and I love that people want to work with us. So we said, oh, let's involve multimedia, and that part of having things on time. And compared to what Nicola was saying, The Guardian works a little bit better because when there's an email that says, well, let's agree about, and do you remember the meeting about 10 minutes? You are telling me that in a couple of days you'll give me the 5 images to put them interactive. Well, that's confirmed, and as we have a very strong legal department, that's the way of handling at a political level through emails and between partners. It can be good because if it's your friend, he is only establishing that is your what's your role and what's my role. I know what I have to do, but if the moment has come and you haven't received the email with the data or with the images, well, I'm waiting for the email. Please don't forget. There are some times that we don't receive things, and you can physically say, well, I'm waiting, and people are very collaborative. That works, but I don't know if it works good or bad, but, well, it was good. We had a lot of micromanagement. There was one person responsible of trying to remind people what they had to do, and what they were doing. Yeah, that was great. I told you to be brief, and that was great. Well, we want to make it brief so that you can pose questions. I know that in Twitter people are saying things. The ones that are there. Microphone here, sir, please. We're moving through blocks. Now it's a central block, please. Yeah, hello. Thank you. It has been a very interesting day, and I would like to ask Noemi to clarify. One of my feelings, I'm a journalist, but I'm working on social media, and it's curious when in the morning you write economy in Twitter, you start seeing many fakes, but with links that move you through very known medias. For example, there are people that are retweeting news from, for example, from the Ministry of Economy in Spain. I think that this is the feeling that I have. What's happening? These are links that move to very traditional newspapers, and then we have that newspapers are asking for a rate to Google for the links. So there are some things that, well, we have the feeling that we don't understand anything. Thank you. Well, it's not easy to answer. I many times have the feeling of that we are in a moment of great uncertainties, and in that moment, it's not easy to be correct, and it's not easy to identify what's the correct way to proceed. Regarding the way of the circulation of contents, that's the part that I understand from your uncertainty. It's true that, well, you distribute the contents, and there are people that share these content. I don't know if you want to talk about the people that hasn't got an authorized authority, or I don't understand specifically what's your concern about the part of viralization of the contents. Sorry, we can't hear the... Yeah, what you see are profiles, for example, Marili or whatever. There are people that have access that are tweeting news from the International Monetary Fund or about inflation, and you don't understand it, and that happens every day. And we're talking about links, for example. It's a link building, people that are building traffic. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's there. But we are talking about newspapers. Well, you as a professional or any person that has access to the contents has to establish some filters, some weightings about the contents that you are looking for. we are not talking about competing with that kind of practices, but of being loyal to your basic principles and to the goal of your media, and not getting into that kind of games. Try to mitigate the impacts that they can have, because they have it. But I'm not in favor of getting into competition strategy. But I understand that has to be directly linked to a good definition of the strategy of the proposal in the social networks. How to explain things, how you want to reach the audience, not to use the distribution channel exclusively as a distribution channel. It's one of the cases of the real use of the social networks. We have to use them as a way of building a continuous and a good dialogue with readers, and that in the end has its own benefits. Hello. I think that there are some ways of working. I think there's one that's clear, that when the journalist comes with an idea and the team supports him. But when it's just the opposite, when there's a so big database, that is the part that I'm not familiar with, I have the doubt of saying, well, how can we handle it? To what point are we handling it? Because I think that there are important stories behind. So there must be a moment in which you say, well, I can't be eternally looking for this information. How do you manage this limit? I can't be here looking for things for 5 months, because maybe I won't find anything. But maybe technical tools make it easier. Well, I would like to know how you manage the fact of where we stop looking for in these data and we move to other ones.
Because we need to get it in the paper, we have journalists propose questions, and we go and answer these questions. Usually, if they don't come to us with a data set. Sometimes they come to us with an idea, and we need to go find the data. I've noticed that a lot of reporters on the social beat will look at journal papers that have made news headlines in America on living statistics, marriage, employment, and they'll come and say, can we do the same for the UK? And the UK have they have the data.gov and ONS, and they have data services. They do have it out there. So a lot of times we go in looking for a question, and in that process we actually find something else. So you need to a certain extent, yes, you do need to know what you're looking for. Sometimes we take a topic and we have a hack day where the three of us will lock ourselves in the room. We'll have a Google Doc and we'll put in all the data resources we can find. And then from that, we'll draw out what's called a schema of what's the possible database we could build. And then we sit down and we talk to a journalist. We talk them through, this says age, but they don't take anyone below 18 because it's only adults, etc., etc. We qualify that, and then there's a two-way process. Another thing that's quite interesting is that you end up building your own sources. So the US Food Aid was because the International Development Team are closely connected with NGOs, and there was a researcher on a think tank NGO that said that they knew that this was going on, that there was something in there, but they couldn't get to it. They didn't have the time or the resources. So it was almost a tip-off at that stage. So we knew what we were looking for. Another thing is that whilst looking for data for journalists, I emailed a group. I found them on the internet, just search, I found them on the internet, and I asked them, do you have this data? Afterwards, when they got back to me, they said, we have lots and lots of stuff. Do you want to come in and talk with us? And they're the biggest survey and social data group, and we found out as well that they're a not-for-profit. They don't have an angle, but they want to get whatever they do out into the public as much as possible. They have people like us. They've got hardcore social researchers, statisticians. And because we came in and told them, this is the way we're set up, we won't spin anything. Oftentimes editorial wants to take something and spin it. We tell them no. We tell them there's not enough confidence in the data. We tell them the sample size is too small because we understand data. And from there, one of their guys is really interested in political data. and election monitoring and predictions. And so it's a process, like I said, it's your own journey. You have to start up and do one thing, but you'll find that things will just build on top of things. But you have to be flexible enough not to say that my job is 9 to 5, I come in, I write 3 stories, I go home. It's going to be different every single day. If you enjoy the challenge of being flexible, if you feel you have access to people. So if you find data that you cannot manage, the best person to go to is someone in IT who deals with the employees' data. It's because there's a massive database of each employee and they're an old IT person and they will be able to get to that. I will be able to get to it because I've learned to manage server stuff. But you have people in your organization, not necessarily working for editorial, but you've got people who manage your own databases and you've got servers. If you find something that you can't handle, you can actually just go to them and oftentimes they're really helpful.
¿Alguna cuestión que queráis añadir?
Is there any other question about this? In my case, normally we have data analysts that, journalists that work in data groups, and we make a scrapping, to scrap the data on the website, and then they find other subjects. But if they have a goal, they have a question that they want to answer, they try to reach there. There are many other data, but we have to establish a finish line. For example, we must know which data we have to use. I think it's important not to manage the data group as a blank screen, but to think about some questions that to be informed, to be documented about the kind of content or about the reality that that data are talking about, and to generate a batch of questions and to try to understand if that data give us that answer. So in the moment that you start seeing answers to some questions but not to others, you understand that in that process you have to include other kind of elements or to cross that data with other data. It's important to understand that the answers come not from the individual analysis from a data set, but of the cross of different groups of data. And it's the most innovative data projects, the ones that really come from reality crosses that you haven't initially thought about because they seem to have nothing in common. Well, we are finishing, so let's take 1 or 2 questions, 3 questions, and we'll finish, but we will answer the 3 questions at a time. Well, first of all, congratulations for the meeting. I'm one of the journalists of one of the provinces that is having more difficult times, that is Almeria. This data, journalism, developers, designers, these concepts don't exist. When I see, well, we don't have a community manager for the newspaper, we don't have a designer, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. How can we implement all these journalism advances to explain journalism another way around in a small province? Because in that small journalism, we don't have those resources. Well, Almeria is the 3rd city of the data journalism, so you can't say that there are no developers, there are no designers, because the weekend they will be in Almeria. Well, we have a couple of questions, and the first one is related to the visualization of the data development on the internet. Because of the increase regarding the issue of contents consumption in mobile devices, we have to think of data visualization for the mobile and then to escalate them, or we are still working on the traditional way from the PC to smaller devices in terms of a screen. And the other question is related to the law of access to the public information that I think it will limit to the journalists to make a true work of data journalism. How can we avoid that? Because, well, maybe Noemi tells us that they can have access to this information through other sources, but, well, there are some aspects in your questions that I would like to underline, but let's move there. Yeah, more than a question, it's some kind of reflection. I would like to know what you think about it. I think it's paradoxical that a newspaper like El País has done such a good presentation of all the working process with data and the work in the newsroom, but the other two persons that have been in the Guardian and in the Times haven't done so in-depth presentation regarding organization, from content organization and internal organization of the media. But however, the Guardian and the Times developed data journalism for many years, and El País doesn't. I think it's paradoxical. It's very good because everything you've said looks quite reasonable, quite logical. But the other two persons seem that, well, let's do this and let's see what happens. I think it's not like that. I think that we are talking about other parts of the structure. Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. There are many issues, yeah, but we're running out of time, so please choose which question you want to answer. Well, let's see. I think it's very interesting, everything related to data, not only for organizations in the journalism, but also for any kind of organizations. And I was wondering, for those organizations that are starting, you have talked about champions, which are the messages that these champions have to convey to the senior management in order to sell the importance of the teams to work with data? Well, great. This was the last question. Then you can talk to them when we close. But, well, let's try to make a global answer to including the information. Who wants to start? Yeah, I want. Well, about the media that don't have money, for example, Almeria and small media, then don't have multidisciplinary teams. I've realized that without money, if you want to do it, you can do it. The media with which I worked are independent media. They don't have money. But for these kind of movements, why not trying to link a university of journalism with other one of design, and to make a community work, sharing knowledge? Let's make a common project. Many times it's not about money, it's about the will of doing it. I started working for free with people that knew much more than me, because the knowledge sharing, it's a quite excellent payment. I think that's a beginning, that's a starting point. And in Mexico, for example, they don't have a lot of money, but they developed spectacular works, because they say, who wants to collaborate, and people get involved, and that's the way they implement this kind of works. I think that's the idea. It's an issue that's managed many times when the media don't have money, etc. Well, we can have 40 people with visualization at the New York Times, but if you want, you can. Yeah, but the transparency law, do you want to say anything? Yeah, no. Yeah, two better than one. Yeah, I only wanted to underline that the law the transparency law will limit the access to data. Well, please read it, because I think it's just the opposite. I think it doesn't limit, but it will ease the access to data. Yeah, well, depending on the context, the transparency law that has been approved, but the part of information access is not enforced until December. And in December for 2015, for the autonomous communities and the local bodies, it makes possible that every person, not only journalists, but also every person, can have access to the public information. Spain has been the last big country in Europe in passing such a law. We could have done a fantastic law that could have been in the top of the laws, but it's not like that. I loved a sentence of Nicola, and now Nicola will tell us her experience. He has told, if you get lemons, do lemonade. We don't have all the ingredients to make an enormous cake. Well, let's start with lemonade. I think it's important to read the law to know what we can't ask for and which are the tricks to start asking for, and it's a great opportunity to make data journalism, because before you asked for data and they gave you a figure, and now you will be able to ask for the database, and you will be able to ask, well, I want this database, a copy of this database with all the accounts of the states, or the accounts of my province. I want to have information of this specific issue that I know you have in this kind of information. And the fact of being able to access to this information is something that was denied, and it will be publicly accessible for everyone. I think it's very important to take into account the limits.
For a long time, and I experience, I think, what you are talking about, where part of the Freedom of Information law says that if it is already published, they just point you to it. Part of releasing a deluge of data is you'll get a regular person, a parent, no one who works in the press, asking for something, and then they will reply to them saying, we've published the data here. They haven't answered their question, but they say it's in there somewhere. And a lot of that time, that's why you need a journalist who can access it and answer the question for them. In terms of making that an opportunity, if you're covering Freedom of Information Act in your paper or your news organization, tell them on the website and in your paper, if you send in a request and they point you to something that you cannot understand, contact us, because that's a good way to start on a tip-off, because a lot of these times these people have had their own individual experience, possibly dealing with a department or a minister, and they are annoyed at it, and they're asking it, and then they'll say, oh, but we publish all of our spending things here, and it's a massive amount of PDFs, and they can't go and find out who it is that they were looking for, what company, what exact transaction they were looking for, so they've spotted something for you. One, that's a very, very good opportunity, and that's what we're finding more and more, because they're releasing stuff not as answering questions, they are just releasing data. More people answering questions, they will just point them to something. Another interesting thing is in the UK, the departments are cutting funding. So you're getting less and less people writing up reports and writing up press releases or answering things, which is why they have a legal obligation for transparency to produce data. It means that they can literally just flood things with CSVs or PDFs. Therefore, what we're finding is data journalists who get information already in reports and visualize it are having more and more problems, and they're turning to people more and more like me, who will actually go and digest and clean and scrape things and trace things. That's probably what you could find, but if freedom of information is coming, tell the public, if this happens to you, come to us, because they're already a good lead for you. Another thing in terms of an organization that's small and doesn't have much money, so I have the equivalent of a computer science degree, having never paid for it. I don't pay for any of this. There's a lot of free online resources. I met up with a group from Argentina. Was it El Paz?
Miguel Paz?
No, the newspaper.
La Nación?
The Nación in Costa Rica, and those ladies who started a data journalism team just sat down and went through Tableau tutorials. They just booked time off. One thing that I do as part of because the digital team has very many different skills, I organize a monthly lunch and learn where you will go and you will show you'll show the rest of the team something that you can do. It could be Photoshop, it could be data wrapper, it could be for me scraping, it could be a developer will show us how to get onto our own servers and how to change a file and then get off. You have whatever little people you have, they are multi-skilled. Find them and make sure they share that. And then as well as at these organizations and stuff that run events for free, I join a lot of meetup groups, and when they start off, they ask us, what do you want? And I go and I say, who do you know that can teach this? Who do you know that can teach this? Right? We'll all email them and badger them until they come and run a workshop for free just for us. So again, with journalism, it's about badgering people and about sourcing your sources and their sources and their sources. Get an idea of what you want to learn and what you want to do. Someone within your network will know how to do it. Badger them until they come in and show you.
Bueno, me gustaría, Noemi, que respondieras y luego acabamos todas con la idea del champion, cómo podemos promover.
Well, I'd like to know how to promote the idea of the champion. Well, I'm answering to the loud reflection that we have done. Well, I've started my intervention changing the conjunction. I've talked about journalism and data. I would have loved to talk about data journalism in El País, no matter you are from Almeria or from Madrid. The reality is that in Spain there are not data units in the media, and the examples that we have are very punctual examples. Some of the recent examples have been initiatives in collaboration with organizations or with consortiums, like for example WikiLeaks or the ISIG. One of the reasons why I think it's so difficult to launch some unit data in this country is first of all because it's an issue that doesn't have any kind of visibility. Well, I grew up in the U.S. and I came back in the year 2000 after being 3 years cleaning databases for database about donations that would finance the political campaigns at a national level, and arrived here and I found an environment in which nobody understood what was data journalism. It was difficult to understand that journalists didn't know that there was a legislative tool that could help us in the time when we wanted to ask for information. I think it has a lot to do with culture and with the culture of this country. We're not accustomed to asking for information. Here there's a balance that favors the privacy instead of public, and that has influenced in a negative way the journalism that takes place. I think that the journalism has been highly conditioned because of some filtrations, and that has had an influence on the way of investigating and of researching. I think that we have the conditions to change that, and then I think there's an opportunity. I wish that in the next meeting I can change the conjunction with the preposition, and we can say that in our place we are working in data visualization and in data journalism, but it's not simple. It's not simple because of some of the reasons that I've explained, and because in some complex media with big structures in which apparently you could think that everything could be more simple and that you can have more resources, the decision making are much more fragmented, and the convincement level and the intention to move all those machines are much more complicated than in small media that in which you establish a clear idea and you have established a goal. So to sum up, I would like to take that idea of how to look for that person from inside that can help us to motivate to implement these kind of things. And I see that there's a will of producing. I would like to share with you my personal experience. Well, I came back in Spain, I moved to the US, I came back to Spain, and I talked about data with my friends on TV. That is where I worked before, and nobody understood me. But I found that there was a community with which I had never interacted, that was a huge amount of programmers that met in hackathons during the weekends to solve problems and to release data. And I think that we can find that everywhere. And now there's a community who have the mailing list of the working group of the Media Lab Prado. We have the mailing list at a European level of PDJ. We have many mailing lists in where you can say, hey, is there anybody from Almeria? And you have to look outside your usual places, because I'm sure that you will find people that are interested in changing the world, and you can get together to change it together. Yeah, and linking it with a legal issue, we should have a broad vision. Let's look on other directions. When there's not a legislative body that gives you support, you can find European legislation, and in order to compile data that go beyond your frontiers. In researches, in bilateral researches, maybe the piece of information that you need, you can't find it here, but it is maybe written in a data set that is freely available through, for example, the US administration. For example, documentation about communication that could be shared, for example, between the US Embassy, the WikiLeaks from the year 81, for example, are available in the files of the Department of State. For example, I'm recalling a little bit what I was working in, something regarding the issue of Palomares, the bilateral relationships, the issues with the king or with the prince. Those documents are released and are publicly accessible in places that are not ours, but is one of the benefits of the internet and the localization of content. You can go beyond those barriers that existed not so long ago. Well, I think, Gandhi says, make the change that we want to see on the others, and I try to be the change that I want to see in my team, and I always fight. I'm not afraid of getting a no, but because if I get 100 no's, I get one yes. So I always like to fight.
I would like to say that the mentor that you're looking for and the person in your organization that can make change is you. If they're not there, you should just be that person. And the main thing is that you will benefit so much more so than your organization, because all the skills that I have is worth far more than any byline, because I can take this with me, I can adapt it to a certain extent. I feel much more in terms of job security, because as they make cuts in editorial, they will not make cuts in digital, and I get people asking me to work for internet companies. So it is about not being afraid and empowering yourself. And the most important thing is that everyone else in the data journalism, in the New York Times, all the people you see doing the fantastic amounts of visualizations, they don't know it either. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea how to get things through their system. They have no idea what the future will hold. They don't know which library to use. They've all Googled it. So when in doubt, just Google it.
Bueno, esto no tiene nada que ver con que Google patrocine.
This has nothing to do with the fact that Google sponsors this speech, but it has been a big end. The best champion is in you, and this is just the launch of this meeting. You can go to the Media Lab at 4 p.m. We will be 4 hours and a half with Mariana, developing a data project, a visual project with Illustrator and Adobe After Effects, and there are workshops to continue learning and to foster that champion that we have inside. And thank you very much for attending, and thank you to Fundación Telefónica for giving us permission to being here. Thank you very much.